Imagine learning how to use the most in-demand web development framework to build any website that you want. Not only that, but be able to add skills to your resume that will get you to the top of every job application. If you want that, then learning Next.js effectively is the only way. And there is no better way to learn Next.js than by building a real project. So for that reason, in this video, we will learn how to build a full-stack Next.js application by practicing all of the important Next.js concepts like server actions, authentication, route handling, server components, and much more. We will build a beautiful inventory management app with an interactive dashboard that you will be able to add directly into your resume and impress your employers. Now, if you really want to learn Next.js to the fullest of its capabilities, I actually just released my full next level Next.js course for beginners. This course will take you from a complete Next.js beginner to understanding all of the necessary core concepts required for you to call yourself a master at Next.js. This course contains 3 projects for you to build, and it comes with my full assistance for all of your questions. If you are interested in checking it out, just go to www.webdevultra.com/nextjs or just click the link in the description. We have a 20% discount code for the first 100 people, and this discount went away pretty fast the last time we released our React.js course, so make sure to check it out. And now that we are ready, let's get into the video. Okay everyone, now to get started, we want to set up our Next.js project. To set up Next.js, you have a couple commands that you can use, but the most common one is going to be the create next app command. So I'm going to come over here. I'm going to open up my terminal and run the command npx create next app. Now what this is going to do is it's going to start prompting us with some questions. For example, what is the project named? I want to create the project inside of the directory I'm already inside of, so I'll just put a dot to create that. We're going to be using TypeScript in this video, so I'm going to say yes to that. We want to use ESLint, even though we don't really mind any of the other options as well. We will be using Tailwind CSS, so that's a yes for that too. I usually don't like to structure my apps with a source directory. Some people do. That's whatever, it depends on what you prefer. I won't, so I'll click no. We definitely want to use the app router. We'll definitely want to use TurboPack, no for import alias, and that should be good to go. Now, when we create our app, we finish its building, we will just run npm run dev. And if I open up my browser and I refresh the page, you should see that we should have the boilerplate code running. Now, the first thing we want to do is we want to structure our project. The way we're going to do this is we're going to come here to our project and we're going to first create the structure for our routes. Now, based on what you saw in the demo of this video, we are building an inventory management app. And in that app, we're going to have a variety of different routes. The first route we're going to have is going to be the dashboard route. So I'll create a folder over here, and inside of it, I will later create a component that will render the UI for that route. But for now, we'll just keep it empty just for our understanding of at least the structure. The next thing is I'll create the folder for the add product. Now the add product route is going to be a page where it has a form and the user can add a product to their inventory. Then the next one, it's going to be the inventory route. So here we're going to add the inventory route. This is where they can see their entire inventory. They can filter through it and delete items from their inventory if they want to. Now the last two are going to be related to the user's account. The first one is the settings. That's going to be just a settings page where the user is going to be able to see their information, update their password, sign out, delete their account, that kind of stuff. And we're going to have a sign in page where the user will be able to sign in. Now, the initial route is going to be in this page.tsx. Now, this page over here is the home page, and it is what you're seeing over here. You see, it's completely empty right now, but I don't really care about what you put in this home page. It could be like a landing page. You can make it into whatever you want. I like a minimalist design. However, in this video, this is not part of what we're focusing on. We kind of want to focus on the dashboard, on the inventory, on all of the stuff that happens after you sign in. So what I'm going to do with this is I already have the code for the UI that I wrote for this page specifically. And if you want to use the same code, feel free to do so. Again, this is the only page in this whole project where I'm not going to show myself manually writing every single line of it, just because it is basically just HTML or JSX with Tailwind CSS. And most likely, you don't even want to have the same landing page as me. But if you do, just go for the description and you'll be able to find the code for this video. Now, what I built here is just a simple UI where there's a description for the project, for the website, a little description. This is the title, this is the description, and then there's 2 buttons. This learn more really doesn't do anything, but the sign in should take us to a sign in page. Now, after you're done just copying and pasting this, here is where things get interesting. We want to set up authentication in our project. Now, to do that, we're actually going to be using 2 different services that are going to help us. Both services are absolutely free and are great and work well together. The first service is Neon. And Neon is a serverless PostgreSQL database where you can really quickly set up a database for your project that is going to be hosted for you. It is extremely fast, it scales really well, and if you want to check them out, just go ahead and click the link in my description. They are completely free and they're going to be what we're going to be using in this project. I use Neon so many times, it is great. You'll log into your account and you'll be able to go into the console, and here you're able to create new projects, which then come with new databases that you can use for your own projects. Now, this is what we're going to be using to store data. Now, for authentication, we're going to be using a service called StackAuth. And the reason why I chose StackAuth for this video is because it has a bunch of pre-made authentication components that some other libraries might not have, and also it actually has great integration with Neon. Neon now has an authentication service where basically you connect Neon, you connect your StackAuth to Neon, and you can utilize Neon as the place where you handle all your authentication for your project. So everything is going to be super simple and seamless. So to get things started in our project, we want to allow the user to sign in. But to even do that, we need to set up Neon for our application. So let's get started. I'm going to click here on New Project, and we'll give a name for this project. I'm going to call it Inventory Management App. We're going to keep the Postgres version as 17. I'm going to choose AWS, and the location, you should definitely choose the location which is going to be the closest to wherever all your users are going to be. To get the best connection. I am in the West, so I'm going to choose AWS West 2, which is in Oregon. It's kind of close to where I am. Perfect. I created this, and immediately we have a database. Now on Neon, you can find your database tables on the tables section over here on the left. You see, we have absolutely no tables in our database, but that's going to change. Because what we want to do is we want to come into our project and we want to set up the database tables for our inventory management app. Now, whenever you have a project that interacts with a database table, you definitely want to utilize an object relation. No, you definitely want to utilize what is known as an ORM. An ORM will help you execute your database queries, your mutations, whatever you're doing to your database. It's going to make it 1,000 times easier. And there's so many options out there, but one of the most famous ones and one of the most secure ones is Prisma. So Prisma is what we're going to be using for this project, and it's going to help us connect our project to our Neon database. So to connect Prisma, to set up Prisma into our project, what we need to do is we need to open up our terminal, open up a new tab, and we need to run npx prisma init. Now, if you don't have Prisma created in your project, it will, or if you don't have it installed in your computer, it will say you need to install Prisma in order to continue. You press Y, or you just press enter. It's going to start setting it up, and immediately you'll notice that what it does is the following. First things first, it creates this Prisma folder in your project, which inside of it there is a schema.prisma. Now, what this will do is it is going to allow us to define how our database tables are going to look like, how they're modeled in the Prisma language, which will then allow us to push those changes and since we're going to connect our database table in Neon, those changes will appear over here so that you don't need to manually create them with the UI. Perfect. Now, the second thing that that command did is it created a .env file. This file now has a variable called database URL with a huge link. What we want to do is we want to replace that link with the database URL from our database on Prisma. Now to do that, we'll go to our dashboard, we'll click on connect, and you'll see that we should see this connection string over here. We'll copy the string directly, and then we're going to come back here and we're going to delete whatever was here before and replace it with the string that we just copied. Perfect. Now, every time we make a change to our schema over here and push those changes should be reflected on our Neon database. Now, let's go back over here and let's think about what we're trying to create for this project. Now, in this project, we want to keep track of two pieces of information. The first one is we want to keep track about information about the user. And the second thing is keeping track about information related to the products, right? So a product will have, for example, the name of the product. It will have a SKU value to it. It will have a price, the amount of quantity that we have of that product. Also, whoever created, when they created that product, all the pieces of information. And the second thing is we need to keep track of the users in our project. However, since we are using Stack Auth with Neon, we don't need to create a table for users. That table will exist over here. Now, I'm going to click on Enable Neon Auth, and it is going to enable Neon Auth into our project, and we will be able to set it up. Now, how are we going to do that? Well, the first thing we do is we go here to the configuration, and we see that there are a bunch of environment variables that we need to put into our project. The first thing is we're going to click on copy snippet. We're going to come back here to our .env file, and we're just going to paste that snippet. I just realized that we didn't even need to manually copy the link that we had before because that snippet just gives it to us. So I can just delete this, what we put before, because it's the same thing, and we'll keep it more organized this way. So the first are environment variables related to Stack Auth. So we have a Stack Auth project ID, a Stack publishable client ID or key, and a Stack secret server key. Make sure you don't use the exact same values as me because you might think that that's obvious, but trust me, people do use the same environment variables as me. So don't do that. I'm going to delete this project right after so that you guys don't actually have access to this information. Now that we have the configuration variables created, what we want to do is we want to create the infrastructure for having Stack Auth work in our project. We're going to let the schema.prisma file be whatever it is right now until we have to deal with actual products, and then we're going to create the table for it. But for now, we'll just focus on the users. Now, to set up Stack Auth, we actually can use a command on our terminal that it is going to generate it for us. So I'm going to paste the command here. It is npx at stackframe/initstack.no browser. When we run this command, it is going to start asking us some questions. It says, welcome to Stack Auth. It knows it is a NextJS project, and it's asking if we want to install it. I'm going to press enter. So it's going to start installing all the dependencies that are necessary to set up Stack Auth. And when it's done, you'll see that it says commands executed, and it specifies that it made changes to some of the files. Now, let's take a look at what it did. So first things first. It created here a folder in our app called handler, and it created a page.tsx that includes this over here. Now, what exactly is this? Well, with Stack Auth, they actually set up a bunch of routes for us, like the sign-in route, if we want to, the account settings route, if we want to access that as well, that we can access related to the user authentication. And with this handler over here, it is basically calling this stack handler component from StackFrame to be able to handle what is shown to all of those routes. So this is something that you don't touch. It is part of what they create. The second thing is they created a loading.tsx, and we are going to actually make our own loading.tsx. We're going to make it customized for this project. So we're not going to be touching that right now. The next thing is it created this stack folder, and in the stack folder, there's a client and a server file. And this is great because each of them will contain this variable called the stack server app, or in this case for the client is the stack client app. And they are used to access Stack Auth and its features through either server or client components. So for example, with the client.tsx, if you need to access authentication information in any component that is a client component, like a form component or anything like that, you'll use this. If you're in a server component, which is 99% of the components we're going to be building in this app, you will be using the Stack Server app. Now, why are we building our app with mostly server components? One of the main benefits with NextJS is the fact that it is server-side rendered. And the best way you can maximize the benefits of NextJS is for you to build your app in a way such that most of your app is server-side rendered, and then there's going to be a minority of it, some small components that are going to be client-side, because you have to have client-side functionality in an app in most cases. Like, so if you have a form or anything that needs to access a React hook or anything like that, we will be creating a client component for that, but that's going to be a minority part of our project. Great. So now that we set up Stack Auth, we can actually start building the sign-in page. And the sign-in page is going to be super simple. I'm going to click here on New File. I'm going to create a page.tsx, and we'll be able to start building the UI for this file. So I'm going to say export default function sign-in page. And in here, we want to return some simple UI. The first thing is I want to return a div that has an inner div inside of it. And the top div will have some class names to it. The first is we're setting a minimum height of the screen so that it's the full page. We're setting it to have a display flex. We're going to center the items so that they're in the middle of the screen and also on both horizontal and vertical, so that it's actually in the middle of the screen. The second thing is we want to put inside of this div the sign-in component. Now, this is where 99% of our UI for the sign-in page is going to come from. You see immediately when I open this up, this is what we see. This is great, right? This is all of the UI for both signing up with GitHub, signing in with Google, signing in with your email password that you need to do. You don't have to create any of it because the stack frame component has it already. Now, the only thing I wanted to also add here is some sort of link to go home. So I'll put here, go back home. Something like that. You can be more specific. This is just so that we have access to it right now. And I'll write a link. I'll make an href to the homepage. And this should be good to go. If I click here, we should be able to go back home and then go to the sign-in page. Now, immediately you notice that this page is completely black, and that's not good. The thing is, if we open up our globals.css, there are a bunch of stuff that comes with it. Now, we're not really going to be doing much with this globals.css file. We're going to be using Tailwind callers. We're going to be, we're not going to be using any custom callers or anything like that, or creating any utility classes. This project is not going to have black and white themes because I don't even think it matters for a project like this. So I'm just going to delete all of that. I'm going to leave it like this, and this should be fine for the globals.css. Now, another thing I want to do is I just want to add some color to this page. I want to make it be the same background color as we have over here. So to do that, I'm going to add here a BG gradient to BR. This is going to make it such that we can make a gradient from the color purple 50, which is very, very it's barely purple. It's just white and purple, to the color purple 100. So if you're not familiar with making gradients in Tailwind CSS, this is how we would do it. And you can see a slight gradient here at the bottom. Now, the next thing is I want to add a class name to this div. We're going to set it to be a max width of MD. We're also going to set the width to be full, and we'll set a space in the Y direction to be 8. So you'll see this will now have a little bit more space in between each other. Now you can see we have a beautiful sign-in component. Also, because it created the loading.tsx over here, the loading for all of these components are shown. So if I refresh the page, you see there's a loading state for this component. So it's pretty cool. Okay, great. Now we have this. Does it actually work? Well, let's test it out. I'm going to sign in with GitHub. I'm going to click over here. It's going to ask if my GitHub account authorizes it. I'm going to click authorize, and let's open this up. Let's see what happens. Great, I'm back in the home page, but did it actually work? Well, there's one way we can know. If I go to the sign in page, what happens? Oh, I put sign in incorrectly. It has to be like this. Well, it says you are already signed in. Sign out. That state is already handled by StackFrame. Now, the real way to know if it worked is if we go to Neon over here and we go to the auth for users, you see that now there is a Pedro Machado user that joined on September 21st, 2025 at 4:13 p.m. So you can see all of your recent signups and all of your user information over here. Great. That was pretty easy. We basically didn't have to do anything. We're here. Now that the user is able to sign up, let's start creating the state of the app where the user can see a full dashboard with a sidebar, their inventory, and so on. So in order to do that, the first thing we need to do is we need to create the data that is going to fuel all of those routes. So we can see a dashboard if there's no data in the database table. We can't add a product if there isn't a product table. Same thing with all of the other routes. So what we want to do is we want to go back to where we left off with Prisma, and we want to create the Prisma model that is going to represent our table. So in order to create a model on Prisma, it's actually pretty simple. These two things that are over here, if you're not familiar with Prisma, they're just for configuration. They just link our URL for our database, the one we have in our environment variables. And also there's an output if you want to output your types into a specific folder. You can keep this. I like to just delete it, so I don't have to worry about that. So you can delete that as well. Now, below here, what we can do is we can define our table. To define our table, we create a model and we give it a name. So in this project, we have products, and each product will have certain fields. The first field it's going to have is an ID, and an ID, to define its type in Prisma, you just give the type right next to it. So it's a string. And specifically for an ID, we give this two decorators to it, these two properties to it, so that it knows that it's an ID, right? So you give the ID property, and you also specify that you don't have to actually pass an ID whenever you create a product. You can just default it to call this CUID function that will assign a UID to that field. Now, the other ones are going to be simpler. The second field we want is a user ID. Now, what is a user ID? It's just the ID of the user who created this product. So in this case, we're going to assign the stack auth user ID of the user we just created. So if I go back here into the Neon console, you see I was created. If I click this view details, you see that I was assigned a user ID. That's what's going to be part of that type. Now let's go back here. The next thing we need on a product is we need a product name. A product name is just the name of the product, self-explanatory, and it's going to be a string. The next thing is an SKU or SKU. It is basically a number that is unique, and it's kind of internal so that retail companies can keep track of their products. So it's each product has a unique identifier, and that's what this SKU means. Now, since we're not really a company, I don't really care about this. I'm gonna make it optional. So I'm gonna make a string that is optional. But one thing we want to enforce is that if you pass a SKU, then it has to be unique. Now, the next thing we want is a price. A price can be a number, but it's better to define it as a decimal, because we can also put prices with with cents, right? And we want to specify what kind of price this means, right? Because there's no such thing as something that is $2.8586, right? It only goes to 2 decimal places. So the way we do this to enforce this in Prisma is by adding the db.decimal property over here. This allows us to specify by adding 12 and 2 that we only want up to 2 decimal places. Now, down here, we want to specify also that we want to know the quantity of the items. Quantity is going to be an int, it's not a decimal. And if you don't put a quantity, it's going to default to 0. Now, we also want to keep track of if the the product is actually considered to be low stock, and that might change depending on the product. So if you think about it, if you're a company selling tractors, right? It's not considered to be low stock if you have 100 tractors, because they're huge and they cost a lot, and it takes a while to sell them. But if you have a chocolate bar and you only have 100 left, that should be gone in a day or two. So that's a different low stock property to it, right? For a chocolate, the low stock status is given at a much higher quantity than for example, for a tractor. So what we want to keep track is what number is this product considered to be at a low stock. So I'm going to make a low stock at, pass an integer, and this is optional, but it's good to pass it as well so that we can keep track of them. The last two that we want to add are properties that I think you should add to every table you create. The first one is the created at, and that's going to be of type datetime. And it's just whenever you add this product to the table, when was this product added? And you can actually do that automatically. You can pass a default property and call the now function, and it will automatically add that. You don't need to pass that value to your whenever you add data to your database table. And the last one is the updated at field, which is again a date time, and you can give this updated at decorator that will just basically fill this up every time you update row in the database table. Now there's only two more things we want to do here, and this is a bit more advanced, but when we get to the point, I'll be able to explain it better. What we want to do is we want to create a composite database index on our table. This will make it such that there's an index to two columns together, which whenever we need to query information from this database table, it will make it actually faster to filter and sorting whenever we do that. So we want to do it for two actual columns together. So to create one, you just create an index, you pass an array, and the two columns we want is a user ID and a name. And we also want to create another index, but this one is not a composite one. We only want to create it for one column. It's the created at column. So this should make it such that we are able to create our database table and save the information about the products. So now that we defined this, how do we send that to here, right? How do we send that to the Neon console so that we can see it in our tables over here? Well, to do that, it's pretty simple. What I want to do is I want to open up the terminal again. I want to clear this terminal so you guys can see everything better. Then I want to run npx prisma migrate, which will migrate the model you have here from your schema to to wherever your database is being hosted. Then we want to say dev, which will make it, will let it know that we are currently in development. And we want to give a name to this migration. I'm just going to call it init because it is the initial migration we are making. When I press enter, since we connected our database table correctly, this should create the table in our console. So you see, it seems to have worked. It is running a generate command, which will generate types for our model so that we can have type definitions to the product model. And it seems to be successful. If I come over here and I refresh this, we should see the table now over here. Now we see two tables. The first one is the Prisma migrations. Every time you make a migration, it will add a new row to this table, and that's fine. You don't have to worry about it. You don't even need to look at it. It just saves that information, which is good for tracking. The second one is the product, which is the one we really care. And you can see all of the columns that we wanted are over here. Perfect. It's in perfect position for us to start adding data to it. Now, how are we going to add data to this table? There's multiple ways. We're going to have an add product route, and that's great. We're going to do that. But for the meantime, I actually want to add some fake data to our database so that we can test it. So we can use it for creating the other routes that require data and not have to create everything manually. Now, to do that, you can create what is known as a seed file. Now, a seed file is a file you create for your database tables, and it seeds the table. It inserts that initial data into your table that maybe you're going to be using for testing, but you're bypassing having to do it through your own website. So to do that, we're going to click here on the Prisma folder. I'm going to create a seed.ts. This is going to be a JavaScript file that will contain the logic to adding the new products to our table. Now, how do we do this? Well, the first thing we need to do is we need to import Prisma client from Prisma-client. This is going to give us the access to the Prisma variable that we can use to access our tables. Now with this, we can create a function that will be executed when we run this seed script. We're going to call it main. And in here, we want to basically write logic that will create a bunch of products, random products, for a specific user. Now, I specifically want to create products for the user account that I just signed into. So if I go here to auth, I want to create that so that we can see that data. So I'm actually going to copy here, view details. I'm going to copy the user ID, and I'm going to create here a variable called demo user ID. I don't know. And I'm setting it equal to this. Now, we want to write some logic such that this script is going to add a bunch of items into our products table. Now, to do that, I have this script over here. I don't want to manually write it again because we're going to go over using Prisma and adding stuff to the table when we get to that part. We're just doing this first so that we have some data. What this does is very simple. It uses the Prisma variable, right, the Prisma client, to access the product model, and it calls the create many function. The create many function is a function used to insert more than one entries into a table in your PostgreSQL database. Now, we have here, we specify that we want to do that to the product table. And in here, we pass an object with a data. Now in this data, it takes in an array of objects that represent a product. So you see, all this is doing is it's creating an array with 25 items. That's the amount of products I want to add in the beginning. And for each of those products, it's creating a product that is very simple. The user who created the product is me. It's the user ID I put over here. The name of the product is going to be very simple. It's going to be product 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we don't get confused. The price is just random. The quantity is random. And the low stock, I just set it 5 to all of them, but we can obviously change that. And the created at, I specifically wanted to make them random. So it's a random value. It's like it changes for each thing so that we can test how it looks when products were creating at different parts of or different times. Now, I highly recommend that you run the same script so that you get the same kind of data as I do. Now, the next thing we want to do is we just want to come here and call the main function. We're going to catch any errors that happens, and if nothing happens, either we catch it or it's successful, we're just going to disconnect the Prisma table. That's what usually happens when you have a seeding script. I also just want to put a console log over here so that we know that the script was successful and we should be good to go. So now that we have our script created, we can run it. I'm going to come over here and I'm going to clear this up. I'm going to say node, and then I want to go directly into where this file is. So it's in the Prisma. So I'm going to say Prisma/seed.ts. If I run this, it should execute the script. So if I press enter, you see it says seed data created successfully, created 25 products with the user ID and the user ID that I put. Now let's test this out. Let's see if it actually did. If I go over here and I refresh the table, we should see 25 products, each with a different price, different quantity, and they were created at different times. So now we have some data. Whenever we start building the front end, we're going to be able to do it. Now, to start building the dashboard UI, we have to create the component that is going to serve as the sidebar. So we're going to start over here with coming to our project. We're going to go to the folders over here, and we're going to create first the page.tsx that is going to render the dashboard. Now in here, I'm going to export default function called dashboard page, and I'm just going to return a div for now that says dashboard. That's all I want, because I'm just creating this for us to be able to start structuring our sidebar. To create the sidebar, I want to create a folder called components. Now in the components folder, I want to create the components that don't really fit with the pages. For example, the sidebar component is a good example of that. Now the sidebar component is going to be like a navbar, but it's on the side, obviously, by the name. And we're going to export default a function called sidebar. Now for the sidebar, we're going to have some props. More specifically, we're going to take in the current path as a prop. By default, the current path of the user is going to be the dashboard, and that's going to be used to be able to distinguish, like show which path, like where in the navbar we're in. So you guys will see what this means. We're going to put a different color to the route that we're in so that it is easy to know. Now we're going to put the type of this to be an object, which takes in a current path, which is a string. Now in this sidebar, we want to return a div, and this div is going to be of class fixed because the sidebar is always fixed on the left. We're going to set the sidebar to start at the left 0 and top 0, so it starts at the top left. The background of it is going to be gray 900, that's the color, and the text inside of it is going to be white. Now we want to set a sidebar width. You can choose whatever you want. I usually like to have a small sidebar, so I'm going to set it to be 64. Now the height is the full height of the screen, so I'm going to set it to be the minimum height of the screen. And I'm going to set there to be a padding of 6 on all directions. And I'm also setting the Z of it, the Z index, to 10. Now, if we go here, nothing really shows. If I go to the dashboard page, we just see dashboard, but we don't see the sidebar. What I want to do instead is I want to put the sidebar into every single page that will require it. So in here, with the dashboard page, we'll start by making this just be also the height of the screen so that it's the entire page. And we're just going to set as a simple gray 50. I don't want to have a color of white on this. I think gray 50 is better. And then what I want to do is the first thing I call here is the sidebar component that we just created. I'm going to pass the current path to be /dashboard because this is the dashboard page, even though by default we are setting it to /dashboard as well. Now you should see that we should see the sidebar appearing just how we defined it. Now I'll pull this a bit like this so you guys can see the UI as we write it. But the next thing we want to do is we want to set the logo of the website. Now I don't have a logo image for this website, but if you do want to create one, you can make one look really cool. I'm just going to be using an icon for this. So to do this, I'm going to create a div. And this div is going to have a class name of margin bottom of 8. So there's a distance in between the logo section and the other sections over here. This should appear up here. Then we'll create a div, which is going to include, it's going to be a directional div. We're going to say the display is equal to flex. The items are going to be centered. And we're going to space all the items in the X direction with 2 and set the margin bottom to be 4. Then I want to set another div. This will be to create the icon of the website. Then I want to put the icon of the website. Now for the icon of the website, I will be using Lucid React for icons. Now you can use whatever icon library you want. If you want to use the same one as I do, I'm going to install here npm install Lucid React. And this is going to install a bunch of icons that we can use in our website. For example, for the logo, I'm going to be using the bar chart 3. That's the icon I want. Now I can import this at the top over here. So I'm going to import from Lucid React, and I want to import the bar chart 3. Now you see, this is the icon that shows up. Now for this, I just want to set a different size to it. I'll set the width to be 5 and the height to be 5. So it's a little bit smaller. Now for this, I just want to set a different size to it. So I'm going to set the width to be 10 and the height to be 10. I think that should be good. And then what I want to do is I want to add a span with the title of the website. So you can call it whatever you want. I'm going to call it inventory app. And I'm going to set this to be a text large and a font semi-bold. Now to make this actually appear next to it, I just realized we need to put this over here and we should be good to go as long as I close this and delete this. Now it shows up over here. Now obviously you can make it look whatever you want. Actually, I'll make this a lot smaller, probably make it 7 and 7. That should make more sense. Yeah, that's good. And yeah, that's it. So that's the title section. Then below this, we want to start building the actual links. So we'll start by creating a nav over here. And with this nav, we're just going to separate every item in it in the Y direction by 1. Then inside of it, I want to set a div, which is going to have the name of the section for the nav bar. You can actually add more sections to the sidebar. You can add an inventory section, which is all that we're doing over here, but then you can have a team section, I don't know, whatever you want to add to your website. Now for this section divider, I'm just going to add some styling to it. I'm setting the text to be extra small. Then I'm going to set the font to be semi-bold. I'm going to set the text to be gray 400. And I also want to make it always be uppercase so that it's like this. Now, I do think the text over here might be a bit too small. If it is, we can easily just increase this to be small, and then it will be a bit bigger. Perfect. Now, below this, what I want to do is I want to render the links. Now, to render the links, I want to create a list called navigation. And on this list, we're going to create objects for each link in our sidebar with some properties. For example, the text that is displayed for the link. So the first page we're going to have is the dashboard. So I'll make that one. The href for that link. Now the href is just the route the path name to that route. So it's going to be the dashboard route. And finally, an icon to represent that route. So I'm going to put here icon. And for the dashboard, it's actually going to be the same one as we put over here. It's going to be bar chart 3. Now, we want to create the same thing, but for all the other links. And I have done that. So these are the other links. We just have to import the icons. And what they are is we're creating an inventory route with this /inventory route. And we put this icon, the add product route with the add product path name, and the settings with the settings path name. Now we want to loop through that list right below this inventory part over here. And for each item that we loop through, we're going to get the item and the key. And for each of them, we want to render a link. Now to get the information about it, we're actually going to make sure that we wrap this around with a curly braces. And we're just going to return the UI down here. Now make sure you do add the actual parentheses over here, and it should kind of look like this. Now, why do we need this? Well, first of all, in the link that we're going to add, we need to make sure we import the link from next link. Then we're going to set the href to be equal to the item.href. That's the link that it should take us to. Then we want to put a key to this item. The key is just going to be the key from the map, and the label over here is going to be the item.name. So it should look a bit like this, but it's obviously not well styled at all. So what we want to do instead is we want to add some class names to this link. So I'm going to set the display to flex. I'm going to set the items to center. Then I want to set a space in the X direction of 3. Now, why do we do that? Because there's nothing really to be spaced, right? Well, there actually is. Inside of this link, we want to render the item.icon. And you see, this doesn't allow us to do it because the item.icon is a component, and you can't render a component just like this. So to do that, what we need to do is we need to get that icon component, set it equal to item.icon, and render it as an actual component, just like this. And then we'll actually be able to get those icons. Now for each of those icons, I'm going to set the width to be 5 and the height to be 5. They're going to be a lot smaller now. Then instead of just rendering the name like this, I'm actually going to add a span so that I can set the size of the text. For the span, I'm going to set the text to small. Then what I want to do is I want to continue here. I'm going to set the padding in the y direction to be 2, so it'll make everything a lot bigger and spaced out. I also want to make it rounded, and I want to set it to be rounded large. Now, why am I doing that? You can't really see the border. But the thing is, if the path that you're in is the active one, so we're in the dashboard route, if we are in the dashboard route, we actually want to show that we are in the dashboard route in the sidebar. So to do that, we're going to get a Boolean telling us if this is the link for the current active route. To do that, we get the current path of the prop, so the current path, and ask if that's equal to the item.href. If it is, then this is true. And we can change the styling based on that. So we're going to use that Boolean in the class names over here. We're going to change this from quotation marks to backticks, because then it allows us to insert some JavaScript in here. And what we want to do is we want to check to see if the is active is true. And if it is, then I want to set the background of the section that is active to be equal to purple 100. Also, I want to set the text to be gray 800. If it's not active, then I want to set the text to be gray 300. And what this will do is, as you can see, when you're active on the dashboard, it shows that. If we weren't in the dashboard, we don't have the other routes yet, it would switch and show it over here. Now, there's obviously some stuff that we want to change in here, like the fact that there's no padding. So to add the padding, we're going to add here a padding X of 3, and it should look a lot better. Also, on the second one over here, I want to add a hover to it. So if you hover the second one, we should change the background to be gray 800 as a color. So you see, as you're hovering, you can click on them. Perfect. Now we're pretty much done with the sidebar. The only thing we want to do left is below the navbar, actually right here at the bottom. Let me just hide this. This is part of NextJS development. Right here at the bottom, we want to show information about the user. Now to do that, what we want to do is we want to get a div over here and fix that div at the bottom. So to do that, we're going to set it to absolute bottom 0, left 0. So it's at the bottom left. We're also setting it to right 0. And we're setting a padding on all directions of 6 with a border only at the top. Now the border will have a color of gray 700. And after that, we'll enter here and I'll add another div, which is going to have a class name, display of flex, item center, and justify between. Now inside of it, we're going to be using one of the coolest components from Stack Frame or Stack Auth. It is going to be the user button component. Now this component allows us to display a button with the information about the user. So you see, because I'm logged in with my Google account or my GitHub account, it has my profile picture from GitHub already over here. If I click on it, you see I can access information about the user account, like the user account settings, and it takes me to a page just for that information. Now we're going to deal with that later, but you can also sign out directly from here. Now I do want to show the user name and email right next to this, and to do that, you just add the prop show user info, and it's going to automatically insert that as well. Also, it's aware of spacing, so it doesn't actually show the entire email, which is pretty cool too. Now we're pretty much done with setting up the sidebar, and I think it's time for me to open this up so that we have a full view of the page. With this in mind, let's close this up and let's continue building the dashboard. With the dashboard, I want to start by adding a main section that is going to represent whatever is over here to the right of the sidebar. So to do that, I'm just going to set first a class name that is going to have a margin left, not bottom, of 64 and a padding of 8. Now it has a margin left of 64 so that we have some space in between the outside of the sidebar. Now inside of this main, we're going to have a header. So I'll even notify here so you guys can see it. We're going to have a header that is going to have a div And this div is going to have another div inside of it, and that other div is going to have another div inside of it with an h1 tag with the title. Now this is going to be the structure of every header in each page we have, so I'll explain to you guys what we're doing here. So we'll have a header and a padded paragraph tag, which is with the description. We're going to write something generic like welcome back. Here is an overview of your inventory. Think about it. The dashboard page is just the collection of information about your inventory. It's not your inventory itself. It should just give you a stats and summarizations of that kind of stuff. Now, to structure this header, it's pretty much already structured. It's in the place that we want, but there's some minor things we want to change. First, I want to set the margin bottom of this whole thing to be 8 because we're going to put some stuff below it. Then we're going to add here a class name. We're setting it to display flags. We're going to center the items. We're also going to justify in between. Then inside of this dashboard h1, we're going to have here a class name that is going to be text to XL to make it bigger. The font is going to be semi-bold, and we're setting the text to be gray 900. Then on the paragraph over here, we're going to set the class name to be text small. The text will be gray 500, and this is how it should look like. Now, if we come back here, we're pretty much done with the header section. We want to start building the key metrics section. This is where, if you remember the demo, we had information about how many items are out of stock or low stock, how many items we have, the price, all that kind of stuff. But to do that, we need to have access to that information. So what I want to do is I want to come up here to the top of this component, and directly in here, we want to query the information necessary for this page. Now, for the dashboard page, remember it should look a bit like this. So I just open up the final project on a different code editor, and I just ran it, and it should look a bit like this. So in the key metrics, it should show information about the total amount of products we have, the total value we have, and the amount of items that are at low stock. So to get that information, we need to make a query to our database table. And not only that, but we need to find out 3 different things. We need to find out the total amount of products, the total value, and the amount of items that are in low stock. So let's start with only one. Let's just get the total amount of products. To do that, I can say const total products. Then I need to make this an async function so that I can directly query my database here. And I can set this equal to await Prisma from Prisma client, but actually this doesn't really work because Prisma client is the class, right? So we haven't actually set up a variable, an instance of the Prisma client class that we can reuse on our project. To do that, we need to come into our project over here, and we want to create a lib folder. I'll create a folder over here. Let's call it lib. And in this lib folder, I'm going to create a new file called prisma.ts. Now in this file, I want you to paste the following. This is code that I copied directly from the Prisma documentation, and it's required for you to get Prisma client to work in your project. This should at the end export from this file a Prisma variable that we can use throughout our entire app to access and edit our database. So in here, we just have to say Prisma and now import the one from the file on the lib folder. Now, when we're querying for products, we need to specify that we are querying for the product table. So we specify that it's the product table. Then I want to get the count of the amount of products. So to do that, you can use the count function. And the count function allows you to pass in a object inside of it, specifying what you're trying to count out of this products. If you just don't put anything, it's just going to count all of the products, which is kind of what we want, right? So if I didn't put anything here, you see that if I were to console.log total products, and I were to go back over here, open up my inspect element, go to console, you see that we see 25. So we are correctly counting the amount of items in our table because there are 25 items. But there's an issue. The issue is that if another user creates 25 more items and we are just getting the count of total products in this table, it's gonna say 50 instead of 25, even though I only want to show the number of total products that I have created myself, right? This number should only be for one user. So this is an issue. We need to actually only count the total amount of products that the user who's logged in created. So to do that, we need to get the ID of the user who's logged in. And the easiest way to do that, it's actually, we're gonna create a file in our lib folder over here. I'm gonna call it auth.ts. And the reason why I'm creating a separate file is because I will reuse this logic multiple times. We're gonna create a function called getCurrentUser, and we're gonna reuse this multiple times. And getCurrentUser is gonna give us information about the user who's currently logged in. To get that information, we can get it from the stack server app from the stack/server file, and we just call the get user function. Then, since we're going to reuse this multiple times, we can handle what happens if there's no user. If there's no user, we want to forcefully redirect the user by using the redirect function from Next Navigation, and I want to redirect them back into the sign in page. Then, if there is a user, we just return them. Now, in the page.tsx, we want to try to query for that. We're going to say const user is equal to await get current user, and this should give us back the user ID. I'm going to make a variable called user ID, which is equal to user.id. And with this, now we can specify when we get the count of the products that we only want to get the products where the user ID of the product is equal to the user ID of the user logged in. So technically I can even just do this. I do need to wrap this around within object. Now, when you're working with Prisma, this where clause over here is super important. What it does is it allows you to specify conditions for what operation you're trying to make. And here, we're just saying, I want to count all the items in the product model or the product table where this field of that product table is equal to something else, which in this case is the user ID. Now, if I refresh this, it should still say 25 because there's only 25 items. So it doesn't really change. But if there was more items created by other users, it should only show the items created by the one who's logged in. Perfect. Now we have the total products. What else do we need? I want to know how many products are low stock. So how do I do this? Well, I'm going to say await prisma.product again. And I also want to count. Now this one is a bit harder. We're still going to count where the user ID is equal to the user ID, which again, we can just shorten this to become like this. But now I actually want to check to see if the user, the product is at a low stock or not. That is actually a bit complicated, and we are going to eventually do that, but I feel like I want you guys to get your toes a little bit more wet on Prisma till we get to this point. So let's actually leave it like that and go to the next one. The next one is a little bit easier, but a little bit harder than the total products. This next one is going to be the recent products. Now, why do we even need to get the recent products? Because if you look over here, we are showing the stock levels of the recent products. So how many units each product has. And to do that, we want to go to Prisma again. We're going to look for our products and we're going to use the find many function. The find many function allows us to query for multiple rows in the table by specifying a condition. The condition is I want to find the products where the user ID is equal to user ID, meaning the ones I created. But then I only want to take 5 of them. So don't give me all 25, only give me 5. And before that, I also want to order those items based on when they were created, so I only get the most recent ones. If I order it based on a descending order, I only get the 5 most recent ones. You see that if I were to console log this, I'll console log the recent, that's exactly what we get. If I were to come here, inspect element, we should get a list with 5 items, and it should technically be the 5 most recent ones. Perfect. Now we have the recent amount, the total products, and what else do we need? We're gonna leave this two over here for later. We just need to calculate the total price of all the products you have. So to do that, what we need to do is we need to get all of the products and then calculate that price. Now, I'm gonna come over here, I'm gonna create a variable called all products. I'm gonna set this equal to await prisma.product.find many, the same thing we just did. But now what I want to do is I want to specify that I only want to get the same with the user ID. And I can specify that when I query all the products, I don't really need every single piece of information about a product. I'm only querying it so that I can calculate the total value over here. And also I want to know how much quantity of them I have. So like to know the amount of items that are in stock, low stock, and so on. So to do that, I can actually specify that when I query for all of the products that I have in this table, I'm only getting certain columns. To do that, you use the select property, and you can specify which columns you want to select by writing the name of the column and then setting it to true. If you don't write the column, it's going to be false. So we want the price column, the quantity column, and we want the created at column. Then when we get all of them back, we want to calculate the total value of all of them. To calculate the total value, we're going to use a simple trick with some JavaScript functions. So I'm going to call this the total value. I'm going to set it equal to all products, and I'm going to call the reduce function. Now the reduce function allows us to pass two things, right, as an argument, a sum, and we're going to get each product from that actual array. And for each of them, we're going to return the sum plus the price of the product. So to do that, I'm getting the number of the product.price, and I'm multiplying that times the amount of that product that I have. So I do that by doing times number of product.quantity. And since this is a reduce function, we have to pass as well the initial value, which is 0. This should go through each item in the all products array. It should add the price of each product times the quantity to the total amount, and in the end we should get a value. I don't know what this value is going to be, but let's check it out. Let me console log. Apparently it's 15,000 or 16,000 almost. So great, we are getting the total value now. And for now, this is enough. Let's use the information that we just queried and display it in our screen. So to build the UI, we're going to come down here. We're going to add a div. And this div is going to be a grid. So I'm going to apply here a class name of display grid. We're going to set the amount of columns to be 1, but in a large screen and above, we're going to set it to be 2 because there's more space. Then I want to set a gap between them to be 8 and a margin bottom to be 8 as well. Inside of this, I want to set another div. This one will have a class name of bg white. I'm going to set it to be rounded, large, have a border, and make it be border gray to 100. This is going to be each of the different sections. We're going to have 4 of them, right? But you see here, we have the border already set up. I also want to put a padding of 6, and we see now it actually appears. It's kind of very, very light, but it's the whole point of the UI. Then we're going to set a h2 tag. This one will say key metrics. On the key metrics, we're going to put here a text large, a font semi-bold, and a text gray 900, and a margin bottom of 6, so there's some space. Then we're going to come down here. We're going to set another div. This one will be another grid-like structure. So we're setting a class name of display grid. We're setting it to grid calls 3 because there's 3 stats that we want to show, and a gap in between of them of 6. Remember, we don't have the stats for the low stock, but we're just going to put a random number for now. Then when we come down here, we're going to start with the first. So we're going to add a div, which is going to be centering the text. Then another div with the information about the total amount of products. So to do that, I'm just going to put total products over here. and we should see that number appearing. Now, we want to actually put more than just that. We also want to put if this is a change in the previous month. So to do that, I'm going to put over here another div that will say total products. Then below this, I'm adding another div with a span that will say plus and then the amount of total products, because this is how many were changed in the last month or so. And if it's trending up, I want to put a trending up icon. The trending up icon I can import from the Lucy React library, and I can import the trending up icon. Perfect. And it should look a bit like this. Now let's put some of the styles to this. So for the total products, I want to say text 3XL, then a font bold and a text gray 900. Then for the total products here, I want to say text small, text gray 600. And then for this one over here, for the div that contains the change, we want to set the display to flex, the items center, and we'll justify it to center and set a margin top of 1. Then for the span, we're going to set it to be really small because it's just a number. And I want to show the text to be green because it's going up. For the trending up, I'll just set a class name that will set it to be width 3, height 3, and I'll make the text or the icon also be green 600 and have a margin left of 1. And it should look a bit like this. Now, it's not perfectly centered as it would over here, so there's definitely things that we need to fix. For example, I realized I didn't write text center over here, and that's why. Yeah, perfect. Now we finished the first section. I'm going to copy this, and we're going to create the exact same thing 2 more times. Now, they are stacked on top of each other instead of horizontal, so we do need to fix that. The reason is I accidentally copied the wrong thing. I apologize. You need to copy the div from the text center and below, and then paste that 3 times. Then you have the 3 stats. But they're not the correct stats. The middle one is going to be the total value. To get the total value, we're going to get the total value over here, but we're also going to, it's a decimal, so you'll see it looks like this. We don't want to do that. We want to show a full value. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to convert this into a number, and I want to fix it with 0 decimals. And then it will look like this. Perfect. I also want to put a money sign in front of it so that it looks like it's money. Then I'll copy this, and in the total product over here, I'm going to add the same thing. And I'll change the text here to say total value. Perfect. Now the last one is the low stock. Remember, we haven't done that yet. I feel like now we might be ready to do it. So let me just actually render the value that we have there, and we'll go ahead and write the correct value. So I'm going to put here low stock. I'll put low stock here as well, and I'll just change this to say low stock. And again, it should look a bit like this. Now, this number, like I said, is just using the same thing as here. So to get the actual amount of low stock items, here's what we need to do. We need to fetch the count of products for a user with the ID of the user logged in, but then we need to put a condition. We want to find to see if the low stock at quantity is not null, meaning that if we go over here, remember, we made it such that the low stock at is an integer, but it's also optional. We don't have to put that when we add items. So if that's not null, meaning that when you added the product, you made it such that it was, you passed the low stock at, you want to check to see if the quantity of the product is less than or equal to the low stock at. So you use the LTE, which means less than or equal, and you put a number here, which would be 5 by default, and that will make it such that it actually checks to see if it's low stock, and it finds that there's 8 items that fit that criteria. Perfect. Now, one thing you can also do for this is you see how we're getting 3 values over here. We're making 3 queries for them. We're making the query for the total products, the one for the low stock, and the one for the all products. Now, all 3 of them should be for the same purpose. Instead of making a separate query each time like this, one thing we can do is, by the way, let me just take out this recent one that we made, and I'll put it below this because we're going to use it in a second. Right now, we're just focused on this ones. What I could do is I could actually come here, make an array, set it equal to await promise.all, and then pass each of these queries as a item in this array, just like this. I'll put first the total products, then I'll put the one for the low stock, and then I'll put the one for the total value. Just like this. I'll make them each an item of this array. And then, depending on which order we put them, this will return an array with those items. So the first item in this array is going to be the value for the total products. The second item is going to be for the low stock. And the third one is going to be for the total value. And now, with that simple line of code, we can remove these 3 queries. I just realized this shouldn't be called total value, it should be called all products. And with a promise.all, we can do all of them in one single operation without having to worry. Perfect. Now we're done with this section. Now what we're going to do is, this is the key metric section. It's for the top, right? It's for this top over here. The key metrics is actually whatever is below here. This is for both the key metrics plus the new products per week. What we want to do now is do the bottom row. So I'm going to copy the same UI. I'm going to go below here, right where it finishes, and I'm going to add the other section. This one is the one that goes down here. Now for this one, we're going to start with the first item, which is the one on the left. It's the stock levels section. So we're doing this over here first. Now for this, I'm going to create a div, and I'm going to set the class name to be BG white. I'm going to set the rounded to be large. I'm going to set a border. We'll make it gray to 100. And I'm setting a padding of 6. Then inside of here, I want to set a div. And this div will have a class name of display flex, items center, justify between, margin bottom of 6. Then inside of this, I'm going to put in H2. And this H2 is going to have stock levels as the title. Now we're going to put a class name here. We're just going to set it to text large, font semi-bold, text gray 900. And it should look similar to what we had above. Now below this div, we want to add another div. This one is going to be having a class name with a space y of 3. Now inside of here, I want to loop through the list of recent products that we queried before. It's 5 products. And to loop through it, we're just going to say recent.map. We're going to loop through each product, get the key. And for each of them, we want to return a div that will have some UI in it. We'll pass the key as the key that we have over here. And we'll start by creating a structure in here that would fit the structure we have above. Now, the first thing we need inside of this div is we need to have a span that is going to have the name of the product. So I'll just say product.name. Now, all of our products have the same name, kind of. It's just a name of the product plus a number. So you see, this is what shows up. The second thing we need is we need a div for the units. Now to make that, I'm going to go outside of this div that we created over here. I'm going to make another div. And on this one, I'm going to put the product.quantity. And I'm going to say units. And we'll get the actual amount of each product that there is. Now we want to space them out so that one is over here, the name and the number, and the quantity is on the right. Now the color actually is determined based on how much in stock there is. So if the product is in low stock, for example, then it will be yellow. If the product has no stock, it should be red. If the product has a good amount of stock, it should be green. So to do that, I'm going to come up here and I'm going to calculate the stock level. To do that, I'm going to set it equal to the product.quantity. I'm going to check to see if the product.quantity is equal to 0. If it is, then stock level is going to be 0, which means that it has no stock. If it's not 0, we're going to do another calculation over here. If the product.quantity is less than or equal to the product.lowStockAt, then it is in low stock. So it will be 1. If not, it will be 2. But here's the issue with this. Product.lowStock could possibly be null. Also, this should be replaced with a question mark. But yeah, this could possibly be null. So if this is null, so what we do instead is we wrap this with a parentheses and we can check. If this is null, then we'll just set this to be equal to 5. And then this will check to see if the product.quantity is less than or equal to 5. So I know this looks a bit complicated, but it's just a bunch of if statements in one single line. All we're checking here is the product.quantity equal to 0? If it is, we'll set the stock level to 0, which means there's no stock. If the product has a low stock at property to it, then is the quantity of the product currently less than that? If yes, then let's make the item be at low stock. And if there's no low stock property, we'll just assume that low stock means less than 5. And if so, again, if the quantity is less than 5, we'll set it to 1. If none of that is true, it means that the product has a lot of stock, so it becomes 2, and that's the stock level. Now, why do we even need to know the stock level? Because we're going to create some colors, both of the background, so I'm going to call this BG colors, and of the text, depending on the stock level. So what we do is the first item means stock level is equal to 0, meaning that there's no stock. For that, I'm setting the background to be red 600 and the text to be red 600 as well. Now I'll do the exact same thing for the other ones, but it will be yellow and green. And I'll be back when I write them. Perfect. So we have BG red 600, BG yellow 600, and BG green 600, and the same thing for the text. Then what I want to do is inside of here, right before the name, I want to add a self-closing div that is going to be used to create this little circle that we have over here. To make that circle, all we do is we add a class name in here that will be a width of 3 and a height of 3. And then we're setting it to be rounded full. And we need to set a color. So we're going to insert the BG color array. So we need to replace this with backticks and wrap it with curly braces. And we want to insert the BG colors and get whatever color the stock level is. So if it's green, it should be green. All of them apparently are green, but it would be cooler if one of them wasn't. I can actually change that. So I'll go to product 1. I'm going to make the quantity be 1. Save change. Now if I go back here, you should see that it's now yellow. If I were to make, for example, product 2 be at 0, then you should see that it's at 0 and it's red now. Perfect. So this is working. The next thing is showing the text over here to be a different color. So I'm going to come over here. I'm going to set a class name, and the class name will have a backticks over here. We're going to set the text to be small, the font to be medium, and I'm going to insert the text colors and set it to be a stock level, and we can get the text to have that color. Now to space everything out, here's what we want to do. On the top div over here, we're going to set the display to flex, the items to center, and we're going to justify everything in between. Then I'm setting a padding of 3, and I'm rounding everything as large and setting a BG gray of 50. Now for this inner div, we're setting a display of flex, we're setting the items to center, and a space in the X direction of 3. Now, finally, on this span over here, we're just going to add simple classes like a text extra small, or it's just small actually, a font of medium, and a text gray 900. And now you'll see that we have this whole section created just like we had over here. And now we have half of our dashboard done. We're almost done with the rest. Now let's start working on the top right grid, which would be this grid over here. It's going to be the one that shows the chart. And in order to make a chart like this, you have to be using a chart library. Now, the one we're going to be using in this video is recharts. To actually start up this part of the grid, we're going to go above over here, go down 4 divs, so 1, 2, 3, 4. And then over here, we're going to write inventory over time. So what we're trying to track here is I'm going to track how many products do we have per week, or how many products were added at each week. Now, to do this, what we need is we need first to create a div over here that is going to set up the grid like structure. So I'm going to say BG white. It's going to be rounded large. It's going to have a border, and that border is going to be of color gray 200 and have a padding of 6. Then inside of here, we're going to make another div. This one is going to be display flags. I'm going to center the items, and I'm going to justify them in between. Now the margin bottom is going to be 6. And inside of this div, we're going to put a title for this section. We're going to call it new products. I'll just do it lowercase. So new products per week. Great. Then below this, but outside of this div, we're going to create another div. And this div is where we put the actual chart. I'm going to make a certain height for this section. We're going to make it fixed at a height of 48. And inside of here, we're going to call this component we're going to create called products chart. Now, why are we making a component and not just doing the logic here? Well, to utilize many of the chart libraries out there, you need to actually be inside of a client component. And when you're building your app in NextJS, it is essential that you keep abstracting it to a level that you only keep client code on client components and only when necessary. So this product chart component that we're going to create, we're going to come over here and we're going to go to the components folder and we're going to create the products chart.tsx. For now, we're just going to export default function and we're going to export the products chart component, which will just return a div for now. Now, this component is going to have a prop. Now, what is this prop? It's going to be the data that is going to be represented in this chart. Now, this data is going to be of type chart data. Now, we don't have that type. It's an array that we're going to create over here. We're going to define an interface called chart data. And if we think about it, what are we trying to represent here? We're trying to represent how many products were added per week. So the chart data will be an object that has the y and the x-axis. On the x-axis, we're going to get the week, which is going to be a string. On the y-axis, we're going to get the count of the products. So I'll put products, and that will be a number. And that's the data we want to pass to this component. But we're passing it as props because the data is something that we get from here. Now we're going to import this component, and we're going to pass the product or the data directly here. Now, how do we get that data? Now, in order to generate the data, we're going to come up here and we're going to go above the recent value that we have over here. And we want to generate an array which is going to contain the same format of how we structure our data here. It's going to have a week and it's going to have the products. So to do that, we'll create the weekly products data. Because what it's going to do is it's going to generate the weekly products data for however many weeks we want. I want to specifically generate it for the last 12 weeks. So what I'm going to say is I'm going to say for let I equal to 11. I is greater than or equal to 0. I minus minus. So what I'm doing here, obviously because it's 12 weeks, we set I to 11 and we're just going in reverse. Now, why are we going in reverse? So that we have it up to date and the most recent appearing first. Now we're going to start here and we're going to say const week start, set this equal to new date. And then up here, we're going to create a value for now. So I'm going to say const now is equal to new date. And then I'm just going to pass now over here. Then what I want to do is I want to set the start date for the week start. So the start date inside of this loop is going to be the week start, the current date, minus its position in the array, times 7 for 7 days of the week. Then we want to set the hours. And the hours, we're just going to say, set it to 0, 0, 0. So we're going to say set hours so that it's the start. So we'll set it 0, 0, 0, 0. Great. Now we did this for the week start so that we get which part of the week we're actually going to calculate the data for. And then we're going to say week end. To do that, we're going to set and now the date to be the week start date, not the now, because it starts at the week start. And then we get the week end and we get the weekend over here as well. But instead of subtracting I, all we do is we just add 6 to it because there's 7 days. So we add 6 to 1 day. Then the hours, it's not 0, 0 because it's the weekend. So the last hour of the day, it's obviously 23 hours, 59 minutes, 59 seconds, and 999 milliseconds. Then still inside of this, we're going to create the label. So the week label is going to be the label for what we're going to show on the actual graph. So what I want to do is I want to set this equal to a string template because we're going to be using some variables here. And I want to turn the following value into a string. I'm going to get the date for the week start get month, and we add 1 to it because the months are actually like an array. They are 0 based. So we're just adding 1 to get the actual month, because if not, then July, which is 7, the month 7, right, would be represented as 6. So that's all why we're doing this. And we're going to call the function PedStart. So we're going to say .PedStart. And what this will do is it will ensure that it's always going to be 2 digits. So for example, if the month is July, that's 7, but instead of saying 7, we're going to PedStart, make it 2 digits, and the beginning, we're going to add 0 to it. So that if it's not already 2 digits, it starts with a 0 and it has 2 digits as its amount. Now we'll start with this, but then this is just a month. What we need to do now is put like a slash and add the same thing, but for the week dates. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to still use the week start, just like this, but we're going to get the date. And when we get the date, we're still going to pad start to 0, and we're going to get the labels. So this will give us these labels over here. Now we need to get the values for the product. And we've created this whole time frame over here because this is what we need to use to create both the label and the products. To create the products, though, we will create a array called week products. We'll set is equal. We're going to get all the products that we have, and we're actually not going to make another request. We're just going to filter through them. And for each product that we have on our table, we are going to get the product date. We just want to calculate. We have all the weeks that we're dividing our data for. We just want to see which products were created on those weeks. So we'll get the product date, which is just the date of when the product was created. And we're going to return this filtering based on if the product date is greater than or equal to the week start. But not only that, we also need to make sure that the product date is less than or equal to the week end, so that it's perfectly in between this specific group that we're showing in our chart. And with this, we have this array, and we can actually add this label, this point in our data, to our weekly products data. So I'll just push, and it will look like this. It will have a week value, which is going to be the week label, and it's going to have the products, which is going to be the week products. But we want a number. This has the real product information, so we just want to get the length. Perfect. So now with this, we can pass this value over here, the weekly products data, into our products chart data. Great. Now let's make sure that we're actually getting this as a correct thing. So I'm going to say console log data, and let's check to see. I just refreshed over here. We're going to open up the console log and look at this. We get 2 console logs. This, I think, is just left over from the total value console log, but the other one, it's an array of 12 items that has, each of them has a date, like a month and a date, and it's every 7 days, as you can see, and it shows the amount of products that were added on those dates. Now, all we want to do is display that information in a way that will be visible and look really nice on the chart. Now, like I said before, we're going to be using a library to get this to work. So I'm going to come over here, I'm going to close this up, and we're going to run the following command. We want to run npm install recharts. And recharts is a very popular charting library, one of the best ones out there. And to use it, it's pretty simple. We're going to come over here. We're going to set a class name to this div. It's going to be just a fixed height. We're going to use 48 like we did before. And we're going to set the width to full. Then we're going to make this chart responsive. So I'm going to use the responsive container from recharts. And to do it, you actually need to set a width and a height. And I'm setting the width to be 100% and the height to be the exact same value. So I'll just say here, height is also 100%. Then inside of this responsive container, it needs a children. And here's where you're going to choose what kind of chart you want. There are a bunch of different types of charts that you can put. You can put a pie chart, you can put a bar chart, whatever you want. In our case, we want to have a line chart that also shows the area. Why show the area? So that it has this little cool effect, the purple color below the area of the lines. So to do this, we're going to call here the area chart from recharts. Now, inside of an area chart, we need to pass some data. The good thing is we already organized our data and we already passed it as our props. So that's great. Now, the second thing is I'm just going to apply some minor styles to it. If I come over here, it's giving us some issues, but it's because we still have to put some stuff inside of it. But I'm going to put here just a couple styles. I'm going to set a margin. For the margin, we're going to set the top margin to be 5, the right margin to be 30, the left one should be 20, and the bottom should be 5. Now, these numbers might seem arbitrary to you. It's just because this is what I chose to make it look good when I was building it, but you can choose it. You can actually play around with these numbers and see what you think the chart will look better as. Now, inside of here, we're going to first put a Cartesian grid. What is a Cartesian grid? Is for us to see this, like it's barely visible, but it's like a grid that you can see on the chart. So to do that, we're just going to add a Cartesian grid over here. And you can choose how this looks. So you can choose the stroke dash array. And in this case, we're going to put 3, 3. And the stroke is just the color of the lines. So the color I'm going to put is going to be F0, 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 so that it's not that visible. But we're still seeing an issue. Oh, yeah, of course. This issue is because we need to turn this component into a client component. So we're using the rechart library. That is a client library. And to get it to work, we do need to turn it into a client component. So we kind of see the chart already over here, but it's not that visible yet because we haven't actually put the data. Because to put the data, the most important thing we need is to define what the x-axis and the y-axis will look like. Let's start with the x-axis. The x-axis is going to have the following data key. The data key is just what is it going to be the label for this axis, and it's going to be week. The second thing is what is the stroke of this axis. I'm going to put 666 as the color, which is gray. Then you can put other customizations like the font size, which I'm going to put to 12. You can also make it have a tick line, which I don't want it, so I'm going to set it to false. And you can also put an axis line, which again, I don't want it, so I'll put it to false. And now we can see the x-axis with the months appearing, but obviously we have no lines because to make a line, you have to have a y-axis as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this and I'm just going to paste it over here. And I'm going to change this to y-axis. and we should be able to update this import. Now I'm going to remove the data key from here. We don't need it. And one thing we also want, since the y-axis is going to be a number, we don't want to show any decimals. So what I want to do is I want to say allow decimals to false. Now, based on how we calculated the data, it shouldn't have decimals because we just got the length of an array. However, still, it's important for me to just prohibit that from happening. Now, the next thing we need here is, since this is an area chart, we need to define what the area is going to look like. Again, the area is just what appears below the graph. So I'm going to define this area, and there's a couple different properties that I want to pass. The first one is I want to pass a type. I'm going to set it to monotone. The second one is we want to pass a data key. And the data key for the area is going to be similar to what we put for the x-axis, but for the y-axis. And since this is an area chart, we don't put that on the y-axis. We put it in the area. The area is going to be for the amount of products. Now, if you see, we can get a correct amount. It's a shame that they are actually, all of them are 1. But if we were to come over here and maybe change, I'll change the date here for this to be exactly the same. If I do that, maybe one of them will be 2. Let me see. Yeah, now you see that there's a bump over here. That's the thing with randomized data. Sometimes it's not that random. This one over here that I made is actually perfectly random, but I will actually randomize a bit more of this data just so that we have a better sample size, and I'll be back in a second. Okay, I played around with the data, and this is what I got. As you can see, it's slightly similar to what we have over here, but there's some styling that we still need to do. So what do we want to put? Well, let's come to this area, and we want to define a stroke for the area. So the stroke is just, again, the color, and right now it's blue, but we want to set it to a bit of a purple, and I chose this color over here, which is going to be, again, that purple that we want. Now it's going to define the line that is around it, but to define the actual color of the area, we have to put a fill, and the fill is going to be the same color, just like this. And you see now that if I were to refresh this or just look at this, it will be purple as well. Now below this, I'm going to pass a fill opacity. I'm going to set it to 0.2. Then I want to put a stroke width, and this, it's up to preference. I'm going to put it 2. Some people like it to be a little bit more thin, so you choose whatever size of the stroke you want. Now the next thing is I'm going to pass a dot, and the dot I'm going to pass over here to be, I'm going to fill the dot, and I want to make it purple just as how we had on the line. And also I want to make the dot have a stroke width of 2 and a radius of 4. Now you can remove this stroke width if you want to, and it would look like this. But that's a preference from like whoever wants. You can make this be smaller as well. You can make it be like this, and some people like it like this as well. Now the other thing is the active dot. The active dot is similar to the dot, but it's for whatever you're hovering over. Now what I want to do is I want to set the radius to be a little bit bigger, so 4 in this case, and just so that it becomes a bit bigger when you hover it. Now the next thing we need is the tooltip, and the tooltip is just gonna be what happens as you're hovering it. So I'm gonna put here a tooltip from recharts, and for the tooltip I'll just paste here some of the styles that I think matter. All we're doing is I just want to make it such that when you hover it, this thing appears, and it's pretty simple. You just add some styles over here. You put a content styled, you put how that little tooltip is going to look like. So I made the background be white together with the border being white, and I put a little bit of a style around it. So like there's a little shadow, which I highly recommend you do. And then you put the color of the text that is actually inside. Now, in our case, it is showing something like this. It says product 1 and the date. Now we're pretty much done with the chart. So I'm going to close this up, and we are almost done with this page. The last thing we need to do is just add the efficiency bar chart down here at the bottom. So to do that, we're going to come back to where we have our dashboard page, and we're going to go down to where we have here product quantities units. We're going to go down 2 divs below this. We're going to add the efficiency section. Now in the efficiency section, we're going to add a div, and this div is going to have a class name. I'm going to set it to BG white, setting it to rounded large. I'm going to set a border to it, also a border gray to 100 and a padding of 6. Now inside of this div, we're adding another div. This one will have a flex as a display. I'm going to center the items, justify them in between. I'm setting a margin bottom of 6. Now the first thing we're going to do is add a title. It's going to say efficiency. For this title, we're going to add a class name. It's going to be text large, font semi-bold, and a text gray 900. Then I'm going to get out of this div, and we're going to create another div in here. This div, we're going to add a class name that is going to be display flex, item center, and we're going to justify center. Then inside of here, we're going to add something that has a position of relative. So I'll say position relative, and we're going to set the width to be 48 and the height to be 48. Now, what are we adding in here? Well, if you look over here, you might think that this is a chart, but actually this isn't a chart. This is a normal Tailwind CSS with some HTML. Now, I don't want to bore you guys with how you build this specifically. So what I want you guys to do is I want you guys to just copy what I'm going to paste right here. This is going to create that polygon, and it is going to add a percentage in stock. Now, we don't have that percentage yet. This is just manually written. So we see here the percentage of this is in stock. Now, to get the real value here, we are going to come up here right above where we calculated the data for the first chart. And we're going to first try to calculate for the percentage or the amount of products that are in stock. So to do that, we're going to create a variable called in stock. We're going to set this equal to all products. And we're going to use the filter function to filter for each product and compare if the quantity of the product, which we can get by converting the p.quantity to a number, if that's greater than 5. Why? Because if the quantity is greater than 5, that's what we determine to be what we consider that it is in stock for a product. We'll calculate that, and from the filtered function, we're going to get the length, and that's going to give us the number of in-stock items. Then we're going to copy this, we're going to paste it again. We're going to change this to calculate now for the low stock count. I can also change this to in-stock count. Now in the low stock count, we're going to do kind of the same thing, but instead of greater than 5, we're looking for it to be less than or equal to 5. And also, we want to make sure that it's not out of stock, completely out of stock. So we're going to make sure that the quantity is also greater than or equal to 1. Now, why is it giving us an error? Because for a second I thought it was Python, but we need to put a double ampersand here. Perfect. Now, this getting the length will give us the count for the low stock. And finally, the easiest one as well is the out of stock, because out of stock, it's literally we calculate if out of stock count, and we calculate if the number quantity is equal to 0. So for the length of the array of only 0 quantity products, that will give us the count. Now we have the count. How do we calculate the percentage? That's pretty easy. We will first calculate for the in stock. So I'm going to calculate in stock percentage. We're going to set this equal to total products, and we're going to check to see if the total products are greater than 0. Why? Because to calculate percentage, you need to assume, right, that the denominator is going to have a value greater than 0. So, or that it isn't 0. And in our case, if it is not greater than 0, we always assume that the percentage is 0. But if it is greater than 0, so we put a question mark here, we're going to do the following calculation. We're going to get the in stock count, and we're going to divide it by the total products, and we're going to times that times 100. But that can give us a decimal, and it's expected that it will. So what we need to do is we need to round that value by using the math round function. Perfect. That gives us in stock. Now, for the other two, we're going to do for the total stock, the low stock and the out of stock. So low stock percentage and out of stock percentage. For the low stock, exactly the same thing, but we use the low stock count. And for the out of stock, also the same thing. Perfect. Now we have all three percentages and we're ready to actually use those values. The one that is important is the in stock for the actual efficiency one, right? The circle. But we're actually going to use all three of them in this little label section at the bottom. So to do this, what I need to do is replace this value to, instead of saying 67, which is hard coded, we're just going to show the in stock percentage, which should be 60. No, it's around 60. Yeah, perfect. Now let's continue building the section so that we can build a legend down here at the bottom. So what I need you guys to do is go to this in stock part over here, go down 1, 2, 3, 4 divs. And below this, we're going to add a div that is going to be a class name of margin top of 6. And I'm setting a space in the y direction to 2. Then what I need to do is I'm going to come over here. I'm setting a div and we want to set the display to flex. We're going to center the items. We're going to justify the items in between, set the text to small, and the color to gray 600. Now inside of this div, we're going to set the top, which is the first set of percentages. This is going to have a class name of flex, and then it's going to have item center, and we're going to space the two things that are going to be inside of it with a gap of 2. Now, what are the two things that are going to be inside of here? The first one is going to be a self-closing div, which is going to represent a circle for the in-stock items. So how we're going to create this self-closing div is just a circle. We just set a width and a height that is exactly the same, because that's going to be the radius of the circle. We set the border radius to be full, and we set a background. For the in-stock, we're setting the color purple to 200. And we should be able to see that circle now appearing at the bottom. Now, we'll put a text right next to it, and I'm using a span so that there's no extra styles to it. And I'm setting in stock, and I'm just going to put the percentage of in stock percentage directly in here, a percentage sign, and this should be good to go. Now, it's giving us an error, but I assume we could just refresh this, and accidentally went to a different page. But yeah. You see here, it says in stock 60%. Now, what about the other ones? Well, to do the other ones, all you need to do is copy this 3 times. Now, the difference is that on this ones, we're changing the color from 200 to 600. And on the last one, is actually not going to be even purple. It's going to be gray. And we should have 3 circles now. Now, why are they right next to each other? That's because I made a mistake. Actually, we need to copy this as well for each of the divs, or else this won't work. So I'm going to copy this div, and I'm also going to do the same thing over here. And close the div, and now they should be all on top of each other. Interesting that they're not, but I think it's because, yeah, we accidentally forgot to close the first section of the div, and we added an extra close over here. Now it should actually show the correct styling. Now, we're going to change the values in here. The middle one is going to be the low stock. And we're going to use the low stock percentage as the value. And the last one is going to be out of stock. And we're going to use the out of stock percentage. Now, let's see if that makes sense. It does, because it adds up to 100. So we know for sure that it is calculating the 3 different groups of products. Perfect. Now, we're finally done with our dashboard. All we have to do now is build the other 3 pages. Now, the main one is going to be the inventory page. This one is going to have this beautiful table, which is going to show all of the items, and it's going to have some pagination at the bottom. Also, you're going to be able to search for the items through this filter. Now, how are we going to do that? Well, let's go over here and let's create the actual inventory page, because right now, if you go there, there's absolutely nothing. So to create the inventory page, we're just going to go to the inventory folder, and we're going to create a page.tsx. Then inside of here, we want to export default async function, and we're going to export the inventory page component. Now, inside of this component, we're going to have some props. Right now, we're not actually going to ignore those props, and we're going to start returning some styles. So the first is going to be what creates the entire screen. We're going to set the minimum height of the screen to be equal to the height of the screen. Then we're setting the background to be gray 50. But what this is going to do is it's not going to include our sidebar. So to give the look of our sidebar being permanent, we're also going to include our sidebar over here. Now remember, the sidebar does have a prop, so we do need to put the current path of this prop to be /inventory. So when you're here, the sidebar knows where you are. So if you go to dashboard, you should see it being white. If you go to inventory, we should be able to see it be white as well, but we don't. Why? It's probably because we misspelled this over here. Perfect. Now it actually works. Great. Now that we added the sidebar, let's add the main section here. The main is going to have a margin left with the size of the sidebar, so it's going to be 64. Then a padding of 8. Inside of this main tag, we're going to first create the header. So we're going to create here a div. It's going to have a margin bottom of 8. Inside of this div, we're going to create another div, which is going to have a class name of display flex. We're setting the items to center, and we're going to justify the items in between. Perfect. Then we're just going to create an empty div with an h1 tag that says inventory. Now let's style the inventory a bit. I'm setting a class name to set the text to be 2XL. The font is going to be semi-bold. And we're setting the text to be gray 900. Now below this, we're setting a description for this page. We're just going to say manage your products and track inventory levels. Something generic like that. We're also styling this text. We're going to set the text to be small, and we're setting the color to be gray 500. Perfect. It should look a little bit like this. Now we're going to go 3 divs down right before the main, and we're going to create the section for both the search functionality and also the table. We could start with the search, but it doesn't really make sense because why would you implement the search without having data to search for? So I'm going to actually jump the search, which goes at the top, and we're going to create the products table. Now for the products table, to do this, I'm going to create a div here. I'm setting the background of this to be white. I'm going to set the table section to be rounded large, giving it a border, and the border is going to be of color gray 200. And I'm also going to set an overflow to be hidden. Now inside of this div, we're going to create a table tag. Inside of this table tag, we're going to use a class name, which is a width that is full. Now we need to set the header of this table. So we're going to use thethead tag, and we're not using any table libraries because, to be honest, you don't need to. You can just easily make a table with normal HTML and Tailwind. Now for the thead, we're going to set the class name to be equal to bg gray 50. Then inside of here, we're going to set first a tr, and we're going to set a th. Now why is that? Is because we're setting a table row, and the th is going to be the table header. We are going to have 6 different columns. We're going to have the first column, which is going to be the name column. The second one, it's going to be the SKU column. The third one is going to be the price. The fourth one is going to be the quantity. And we're going to have the low stock add property as well, which could be empty, as you remember. And finally, we're going to have the actions. Now, actions, it's up to you. I will add a delete button so you can delete a product really easily, but you could also add an edit product functionality or whatever you want. But here is going to be all the actions that you can apply to each product. Now you see over here, this creates the header of a table. Now let's go back here, and I want to apply some styling to each of these headers. So it's actually going to be the same style for all of the headers. So we're just going to copy and paste each of them. For the main style, we're going to set a padding X of 6, a padding Y of 3. We're going to set the text to be at the left, so it's not centered. And we're going to set the text to be actually extra small. The font is going to be medium, and the color is going to be gray 500. Finally, I want to make all of the texts uppercase, and this should be enough. Now we should just copy this and paste it on every single table header that we have. And in the end, it should look a bit like this, which looks similar to what we have in here. Now, let's go back here and let's continue building the table. with the the T head is done, so we can actually build the body of the table. So I'm going to say T body. And for the body, we're going to apply some styles. We're going to set the BG to be white as well. We're going to divide the table in the Y direction, and we're going to add a divide of gray to 100. Then inside of this body, all we have to do is we now have to loop through a list and create a structure of rows that are going to of cells that are going to be equal to what we have here in the amount of columns. So how do we do that? Well, we're going to loop through the list of items, which represents all of the products. And we don't have that yet. So we're going to come up here and we're going to make a simple request for all of the products. We actually already have the code for that. If we go to the dashboard, if you remember, we did make a query here that gets all of the products, right? It's this one over here. It's a very simple query. It just fetches all of the products. We're going to call this total, total products, whatever you want to call. We're going to set it equal to prisma.product. I'm going to await this, and we need to import Prisma from our lib file. We also need to get the user ID. Now to do that, we're going to call the user and await the get current user and get the user ID from the user.id. Perfect. Now we can actually use the total products by going down here, and inside of the body, we're going to loop through the total products. We're going to map through it. And for each of the products, we're going to render a TR that is going to have the key, and the key is going to be the index. So we're going to actually create a key value in this argument, and we're going to pass the key over here. And the class name, we're just going to apply a hover to it, just so that it changes a bit of the color in case you hover a specific cell. Now, I just realized it says total products is a number. Did we? Oh, okay, of course. We don't want to get the count here. We actually want to get the find many. We just want to find all of the products that are equal to, that were created by the current user. So this wouldn't make sense if this was actually a count, because this would be a number. Now, what I want to do is inside of here, we're going to create our first cell. The cell is going to be for the product.name. And we're just going to directly apply some styling because, again, all the styles are going to be the same for each cell. The style for this is going to be exactly the same style that we have here. We're just going to change some minor things. So the padding on the Y direction is actually going to be 4. And we're not going to text left. The text size will be small, not extra small. And it won't be uppercase, nor it will be font medium. Now, what I want you guys to do is I want you guys to copy this and paste it for each of the columns that we have. I'm not going to show myself doing it because it's going to get repetitive, but I'll be back in a second. Perfect. As you can see over here, I added a value for the name, the SKU, the product price, the quantity, and the low stock at. The ones which were optional values, like the SKU and the low stock at, I checked to see if they were not null. If they were null, we defaulted them to an empty hyphen. So you'll see that for the values over here, we can see all the values in the list of products. And for the SKU, since we never set any SKU, I think for any of them, it's always an empty hyphen. Now, also we converted the price and we fixed it to 2 decimal places. That's something that you can decide for whatever you want. I prefer to only use 2 decimal places. Now, there's one column that we didn't do anything, which is the actions. And that column is going to allow us to delete a product. So I'm going to come down here and I'm going to actually add the same column here, but this column is a bit different. So in this column, we're going to have a form, which is going to have an input in it. And this input is going to be hidden. Now, why is it hidden? It's so that we can have a form in which we can call and serve a server action. Now, I'm just going to call it ID, and it's going to have a value of the product ID. So we'll say product.id. And then inside of this input, we're going to have a button. This button is going to say delete. Let's add a bit of style to it to emphasize that it's a bad thing. I'm going to set the text to be red 600. And when you hover it, it's just going to be the same color, but a bit darker. So this is what we have. You can hover it and then you can delete the specific product. Now to make a delete, we want to get this form, and we actually do want to use this input. As you can see, we are serving the product ID as part of the value of this input. Why? Because we're going to have a server action that we're going to pass this product ID as part of the form data. So in here, we're going to pass an action. It's going to be an async function that will give us access to the following. It's going to give us access to the form data. And the form data is going to include the value of every input in this form. Since we only have one input, which has the value of the product ID, that's a quick and easy way for us to access the ID of the product from this form data. And we need the ID of the product to know which product to delete. Now in here, we're going to call a server action we're going to create called delete product, and we're going to pass the form data. Now, what is this delete product server action? Well, it's something that we can create in the lib folder. We're going to create a folder called actions, and this is where we're going to put all of our server actions. The first one is going to be for the products. Everything related to products that we need it to be a server action, we're going to put it over here. So we'll start by creating the async function for the delete product. Now, like we assumed over here, it is going to require us to pass a form data of type form data. So I'm going to copy and paste that over there. Then I highly recommend that the first thing you do with an operation like this is make sure that the user is authenticated. Even though we already checked it on the route, you want to double check, because with stuff like deleting, it's important that you actually are secure of the operation. So I'm going to say const, and I'm also going to get the ID of the user. I could get the ID of the user from here, but we actually want to get the ID of the product. So I'm going to get the ID of the product by saying form data dot get, and we're going to pass the name that we passed over here, which is ID. And then if this is null, we'll default this to an empty string, and we want to convert all of this into a string. Now, after this, all we need to do is we need to await prisma.product.delete many. Now, why am I using the delete many? Because I want to propose you guys a challenge that I'm not going to include in this video. In this video, I'm only showing you how to delete one item, but I recommend that you add as well a selection over here where you can select multiple items to bulk delete. I'm already giving you the way to do it. You use the delete many function, and I want you guys to add that as an extra to this video if you want to have a bit more of a challenge. In our case, deleting many and deleting only one does the exact same thing. We're going to put here the where of what we're trying to delete. And the where is we're trying to delete the product in which the ID of the product is equal to the ID that we get from the form data, and also the user ID of that product. So who created that product is the user who's logged in. So we ensure that the user has ownership by checking also the user ID. Then when we're done with that, we can assure that this is going to delete the product. How do we test this? So I'm going to refresh this over here. And as you can see, it's giving us an error, but that error is because we cannot pass a function because this is not a client component. And that's an issue, right? We're passing here a function from a form. It recognizes that we're trying to delete, like have a browser operation, like an on-click to a button. So all we have to do to fix that is actually come to this file, and at the top, make sure that we turn this into a server file. You'll see that now, if I refresh this, it is still going to give us an issue. The reason for that is because not only we have to use server there, but also use server in here as well. To make sure that to tell NextJS that this is a server functionality. Now, let's try deleting the first product, because that's the most obvious one that we're deleting. So I'm going to click on delete, and wow, you see that product doesn't exist anymore. Let me refresh this. Yeah, it doesn't exist. Now, one thing you guys might have noticed is that all the products are in different order, which is not what we have over here. And that's because, remember, I played around with the dates. But the important thing to know is that product 1 doesn't exist anymore, meaning that we correctly deleted the product. Now we have our table over here. What I want to integrate to this is the search filtering functionality. So we're going to put a search bar up here, and there's different ways in which you can make a search bar. I'm actually going to keep this server focused. You can actually make a filtering table with a search bar that instantly, if you were to use a client component. But in this example, we're actually going to be making everything as a server component. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here, I'm going to go down above the products table, and I want to create a div. Actually, we should go below this div that we already have. Still maintain above the products table. We're going to add the section for the search. Now, inside of here, we're going to add a div. And on this div, we're going to add a form. Now, the form is for the input. So there's only going to be one input. But on the div, we're going to set a background to be white. It's going to be rounded large. We're setting a border. And that border, we're going to set it to gray 200. Now, we're setting a padding of 6. And inside of this form, we should now set a class name. It's going to be flex, a gap of 2. And we're going to set an action here. The action is going to be /inventory. And we're going to set a method, which is going to be a get, because this is going to be a get request when we submit this action. Now, you might be asking yourself, why are we making this an action that isn't the /inventory? Because usually when you pass an action, you pass a callback function, right? Well, in reality, what we're going to do here is at the top of this component, we're going to filter through the data directly with the whatever we have on this input. We're actually going to be using the value of the input as part of the search params of this route, and thus allowing us to, whenever we call a GET request with an action equal to the route of this page, it is going to refresh the page to be able to execute that. So what we need to do in here is, inside of this form, I'm going to add a input, and we're going to set the name of this input to whatever the value is. Now, the thing is, I'm going to call this Q, and Q will stand for query. It's just the query that you're trying to make for the product. Now, we're going to put a placeholder here. It's going to be called search products. And in here, we're going to set a class name, which is going to be flex1, then padding x of 4, padding y of 2, and we're setting a border with a border gray 300. It's going to be rounded large, and we're also going to set the border to be transparent when we focus on it, and save this. Perfect. Now, below this input, we need to have a button to confirm it. So we're setting a button here, writing the label to be search. And then in the button, we're going to set a class name, padding x of 6, padding y of 2, a BG of purple 600. The text is going to be white, and we're going to set it to rounded large. And when we hover it, the color will change from BG purple to 700. Perfect. Now we have this. If I were to search for a product here, nothing happens other than the fact that now we refresh this route, and the route now has a parameter, a search param, which includes a Q, which is the value, and whatever we put in that input. So if I were to search for just A, and I click search, that will be replaced with that. Now, why do we need that? Because since this is a server component, we can't use states, right? So that's hard for us because we can't use a way to get that data and keep it into a state and then use it. So we do it through this. We set the search param at the top over here. And then what we do is we now get that search param in the props. So to get the search param, we're going to get the search params, and we'll set the type of it to be search params, which you can get. The type of it is going to be promise. And inside of this promise is going to return an object. That object is going to include a Q. And in the Q is going to be of type string. Now, before we even fetch the data over here, we're going to get the search params. So I'm going to say const params is equal to await search params. We're going to get the value for Q. So we need to make sure that there is a value for Q. So I'm going to say if params.q is true, then we get it. If not, we set it to an empty string. And the result of that, we're going to trim. And we can trim by using the .trim function. Then what I want to do is I want to basically go to this where function over here. And you see how we are querying for a product where the user ID is equal to the user ID. Now we also want to utilize this property, which is you can add over here the field, for example, name, which is the name of the product. And you can only query for products in which the name contains whatever Q is. Now, obviously, this will mean that if I do this, you'll see that it will work. It's already working because, as you can see, it's not showing anything anymore. But if I were to refresh this, wait, let me actually just remove this. You'll see now it shows everything. If I were to write product 4, it should only show product 4. It doesn't. Why? Because we actually didn't write product 4 exactly. You see how the P is not capitalized, but if you were to look over here, the P is capitalized. So to make sure that it accounts for that kind of scenario, we need to set the mode to insensitive. And when I do that, and I were to search for product 4, it now actually accounts for product 4. It doesn't care if it's capitalized or not. Perfect. Now, we are sure that it works if we have a Q, but what happens if there's no Q? Still works. Perfect. Now we're pretty much done with that searching. We can search here for product 6 or 5, whatever, and it will show up just that product. Now what I want to do is, we don't want to see this entire table at once. We actually want to utilize pagination for this. But to utilize pagination, we actually need to get the total amount of pages that this will be. So what do I mean the total amount of pages? Well, we want to determine how many items are in each page. You see here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So 10 items per page. I think we have here like around 20 something, like 28 items. So there's 3 pages. And then the last page, there's less items. If I were to go here, as you can see. So it'll be kind of the same thing with us over here. So we need to determine how many pages are there. And to do that, we get the size of the page that we want, so the size of how many items we want per page, and we divide that number from the total amount of products. So the way we're going to do this is we have the total products over here, but that's not a number. Obviously, we could just say total products.length, but the problem with that is that it won't actually account for our pagination because we don't want to fetch all products at once. We actually want to do the opposite. With this over here, we're not fetching all the products and displaying them at once. We only fetch 10 first, and then we fetch more when we go here. That saves us having to fetch a bunch of data. So what we want to do that is we actually want to make 2 queries and combine them. So I'm actually going to utilize that logic that we did before, where we're going to say await. So we're going to set this to await promise.all. We're going to pass an array in here. And in this array, we're going to first pass the first query. And the first query is actually going to be a prisma.product.count. We're going to count the amount of products based on this search. So you see how we have this where search over here, which is it's this property where we're searching for the name. We're going to reuse this twice. So I actually want to extract that. So I'm going to create an object called where. It's the same thing as we have over here. And in this where, we're actually going to copy this entire thing. And we're going to paste it in here. So it's both the user ID and the name. And now we can just replace this with the where. Or in this case, just do this. And in this case, we're also going to pass the where inside of here. Now we're getting an error, and that's because there's a possibility of this part over here being null. So what we want to do actually is we want to do this. We want to put 3 dots and create a check to see if Q is null or not. Because if Q is not null, then we do want to put this object over here. But if Q is null, then we only want to put an empty object. And that's going to continue having an issue. Oh, okay. I'm just going to actually change this to say as const, and the error should go away. It's just a simple TypeScript error. Perfect. Now we have this where object, and we have it twice. Now we can get this and put it as a comma over here as well. So we have 2 queries. We're going to get from the first one, the total amount, so the total count. And the second one is items. I know we are using the total products, but now I want to replace that with items. Perfect. And the total count should return the count of the total items. And then inside of here, we're going to calculate the total pages by saying total pages is equal to math.max. Why are we doing math.max? Because if there's 0 products, then this value is going to return 0. And I don't want to have 0 pages. I want to have always at least 1 page. So we do a math.max of either 1 or the total divided by the page size. Now we don't have a page size variable. We're going to create one over here. Const page size. And how are we going to calculate that page size? Well, I'm just going to set it to 10. That's what I want. The total is going to be the total count. Now this value can be a decimal, and we don't want a decimal value for the total pages. So I'm actually going to set a ceiling to this. And the ceiling is basically, it's going to round to the highest number. It's going to round up. Perfect. Now we have the amount of total pages. And what we can do is we can go here below our table. So we go below the table, we go one div down, and we can check to see if the total pages is greater than 1. Because if it is, then we want to render the pagination control because there's multiple pages you can go to. So we'll start by just adding a class here. I'm going to say bg white. I'm going to round it large, set a border, and a border gray 200. Also a padding of 6. Perfect. Now you can see that we already see this down here because for sure total pages is greater than 1. Now inside of here, we actually want to create a component. It's going to be called Pagination. Now, why do we need to create an extra component? Well, it's because this is going to be a lot of logic, and I think it could behave in itself, and we can actually reuse it if we were to add it to another part of the project. So we're going to come here to the components folder, and we're going to create here the pagination.tsx. Now, inside of here, we're going to export default function, and we're going to call it pagination. And it's actually going to have a good amount of props inside of it. So we're going to define the type of the props. We're going to say interface pagination props. And what do we need? Well, to do pagination, we need the current page, which is a number. We need the total pages, which is a number. We need the base URL because we're doing our pagination through these search params. And we need the actual search params that we get from the route. So it's going to be a record, which is a string. It's like a map of a string with a string. That's what a search param is. Then in here, we're just going to destructure all of that. We're going to set it to pagination props, and we can just come here and get all of that. We can get the current page, total pages, base URL, and search params. Perfect. Now inside of here, we're going to first check to see if total pages is less than 1. So if it's less than or equal to 1, return null. Now, why are we doing this? Didn't we already check for this over here? Yes, technically, but we should still make sure inside of the component as well, in case we ever make a mistake and don't check and pass that on another component in our project. Then what I want to do is I'm going to return a nav, which is going to have a class name, which is going to be display flex. It's going to be item center. We're going to justify this to the center and a gap of 1. Then inside of this nav, we're going to have the structure. First, it's going to be a button, which is going to be represented by a link. And this button is going to have an icon. This icon is going to be chevron left because it's a left icon. And we're going to put a label saying previous. Now, it's going to complain because we need to put an href. So right now, I'm just going to put an empty href. Just something like this. Did it not import this? Also, yeah, import from next link. Perfect. Then I'm adding a forward button. So it's going to say next over here. And it's not going to be a chevron left. It's going to be a chevron right. This is just the icon. You'll see now if we were to import the pagination, actually, there's a lot of props we need to pass. So let's do that before we check it out. So I'm going to pass the current page, which we can get by going up here and calculating that. So I'll say the page is equal to the number of, and we're going to keep track of the page based on the search params. So we actually are going to add over here another thing to our search params called page. And again, if you're still confused with pagination, the page is just this. Which page are we on in our pagination? Are we in page 1, page 2, page 3? You can choose, right? Now, the page is going to be kept in the search bar. So we're going to create a string in the search param. It's going to be page. And down here, we're going to get that page and transform it into a number. So we're going to say params.page. And if it's null, we'll default it to 1. And if this value is completely empty, or it's something crazy, like it's -2, that doesn't make sense, right? So if it's anything less than 1, then we're going to actually set it to 1. And we do that by saying math.max and putting 1 as the other option. Because then if this turns out to be negative number, it actually defaults to 1. Now we pass the page as the current page. The second thing is the total pages. So we'll pass the total pages, and we have that variable over here. Then the base URL is just because we can reuse that in the rest of the project. I don't actually reuse it in this tutorial, but you could reuse it if you want to create more pages. Then I want to pass the search params, and the search params looks like this. It has the queue, and it has the page size. That's a variable we're going to create, and the page size is going to be equal to a string of the size of the page, which in this case is 10. We want to keep track of that as well in the pagination. Now we can actually see what we're doing. If I go over here and go down, we see these two ugly links. That's okay. We can make them look better. So I'll start with this. I'm actually going to come over here. I'm going to add a class name. And in this class name, I'm actually directly going to use backticks because we're going to do some conditional styling here. And here, I'm going to say display flex, item center, padding x of 3, padding y of 2, text small, font medium. I'm going to round it large. And then I'm going to insert some conditional styling. Depending on if the current page is less than or equal to 1, we want to do something. So if it is less than or equal to 1, then I want to set the text to be gray 400 and also cursor not allowed. Now, what is cursor not allowed going to do? Well, let me show you. I'm also going to set a BG gray to be 100, and this should be good to go. Then we want to put just another style. So what this is going to do is, if we are in the first page, it's going to show it grayed out and also have this little icon on your cursor showing that you can't click it. Even though right now we can actually click it, we actually have to disable it. Perfect. Now the other styling is if it's not like that, then we want to make it be gray 700 and allow it to be hoverable. Perfect. Now, if we go back here, I also want to actually disable the input in this case. So I'm going to say area disabled, or just disabled, whatever you want. And I want to set it to be only disabled if the current page is less than or equal to 1. That should make it such that we can't actually click it. Perfect. Now what we got to do is copy this entire logic and put it over here on this link as well, but change it. Instead of detecting if the current page is less than or equal to 1, we check to see if the current page is greater than or equal to the total amount of pages. Same thing with this over here. Perfect. And then we should get, we can't actually pretty much see anything. Oh, did I add the, why did I write previous over here? Okay, yeah, we can't really see it because we're not in the last page in this case, but great. Now, what we want to do is we want to calculate the amount of pages that there are. So you see we have 3 over here. We want to show a button for each of them. And we only want to show the ones that are visible. So to do that, we're going to create here a function called getVisiblePages. And what this is going to do is it's going to do 2 things. It's going to give us the actual visible pages, the amount, but also if there are a lot of products in here, right? There are like 500 products. We're not going to show, I don't know, 30 pages appearing. We'll put 3 dots at some point to represent that there is a range of more pages. So to do that, we're actually going to come over here and we want to do the following. we're going to start with defining a variable called delta. So delta will be how many pages we're going to show before and after the current page. And I think a delta of 2 makes sense. In our case, it's only going to be 3 pages. I'm going to try to add more data in the end so I can see it fully working. But delta would just mean that. That means that if you're on page 5, you will be able to see appearing down your screen pages 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, because you'll see 2 above 5 and 2 below 5. Perfect. Then we're going to define an array called range. This will store the raw numbers around the current page. We're also going to create a range with dots. And it will not only include numbers like 1, 2, 3, but it will also include dots like this to represent that there are more pages there and we don't want to display all the pages. Now the next thing I want to do is I want to build the middle page range. To do that, I'm going to for loop over here. I'm going to create a variable called I, set it equal to math.max, and I'm going to say 2 and get the current page and subtract delta, because that's the minimum amount of pages the minimum amount of delta that we can have, and we want to get the difference in the current page and the delta. Then we're going to check for this until I is less than the total pages minus 1, or whatever is less, that or the current page plus the delta. And we get that by making it be a math.min, wrapping this around. So we're going to say math.min. Perfect. Then in the end, we'll just increment by 1 every single time, and we'll close this for loop. Did I accidentally? Yeah, 1 extra parentheses. And now what do we do in this for loop? Again, we're trying to build the middle range. So it is going to start with the current page minus delta, but that's never less than 2, since page 1 is handled separately through our links. And it will end with the current page plus delta, but that's also never going to be greater than the total pages minus 1, since the last page again is handled separately. So what we're going to do here is we're actually going to use this range array to push every one of these numbers inside of this array. So a good example of what this will look like is something like this. If the current page in this function is 6, the total pages is 10, and the delta is 2, this will return this 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and those will be the pages displayed at the bottom over here. Now, what we want to do is we want to always include page 1. How do we do that? We check to see if the current page minus delta is greater than 2. Then we're going to use now the range with dots, and we're going to push 1 and then include the 3 dots. Why? Because we don't want to put the 3 dots as the first thing. We always want to have the first page. If it isn't, then we don't need to put the 3 dots, but we at least want to always insert the first one. So we're going to say arrange with dots, push 1. Then, regardless, we want to insert the range inside of the range with dots. So we're going to push everything inside of the range array. Then finally, we want to include the last page. This was for the first page. This was the logic that we built for the middle page. And now we're going to write the same logic but for the last page. So to do that, instead of calculating current page minus delta is greater than 2, that's not what we need. We need to calculate if the current page plus the delta is less than the total pages minus 1. Why minus 1? Because arrays obviously start from 0. And then what we do is we do the opposite. We don't set 1 first and then put the 3 dots. We show the 3 dots first, and then we set the length of the amount of pages, so the total pages. And in here, we add the total pages if that's the case. And then in the end, we just return the final result through the range with dots. Now, don't get me wrong. I understand that this might be a bit confusing. If you've never done pagination before, this is definitely confusing. I recommend just playing around with it and going line by line, and you'll eventually get it. As you play more with it, you'll be able to understand what each part of it means, and you will eventually get it. The important thing is that this will give us back the visible pages. So I'm just going to call get visible pages, and we should get that value back. And when we do, we now can go below the previous, but above the next. And we're going to loop through the visible pages. We're going to get each page and the key. And then inside of here, we're going to get the two variables. First, we're just going to get the page, but we're going to call it page number because we want to convert it into a number since it could be a string, right, with the 3 dots. So we want to convert it into a number to guarantee. Then we want to get a Boolean to let us know if we're currently in that page as we're rendering so that it has a different style. We do that by checking if the page number is equal to the current page. Perfect. And then finally, we're going to return the actual UI for each page. It's going to be a link, which is just going to have the page number. I suspect that right now it's going to break because, wait, let me just put an href here. The href right now is just going to be an empty route, but I think it's going to break because of the 3 dots. Let's see. Actually, no, we're not showing 3 dots, right? So if we were to, actually, let me try this. If I were to forcefully pass this to be, I don't know, 19 pages, let's see how it will look like. Yeah, this is how it would look like. See, we have the 3 dots over here. And as we move forward through this, oh, I just made the link take us to the home page. Yeah, we still have to work on that for me to show you guys the real value, but it should actually push the 3 dots forward as well. Perfect. Now we get this page number, but how do we style it? Well, in the class name over here, we're going to, again, apply some conditional styling. So I'm going to be utilizing backticks, and I'm going to set the padding X to be 3, the padding Y to be 2, the text to be small, the font to be medium, and then I'm going to round it large, and I'm going to check to see if this is the current page. Why? Because if it is, then I'm setting the BG to be purple, 600, and the text to be white. If it's not, then I want to set the text to be gray, 700, and I want to hover it to set it to BG gray, 100. And then I want to set over here the BG to be white. I'm setting a border, and that border is going to be gray, 300. Now it will look a little bit better. It looks exactly how we have over here, right? But what happens if I come here and I change this back to say 19? This doesn't really look that good. I want it to actually look unique. It looks exactly how it looks over here. So instead of that, I want to first come up here and I want to make sure that if the page is equal to 3 dots, which is what we made it be in that visible functions, the visible pages function we have above, then I want to return a different UI. So I want to return a span, not a link. And this span is going to have 3 dots, but then I'm going to come here, I'm going to set the class name to be equal to padding X of 3, padding Y of 2, and a text to be small, and that text to be gray 500. Also, I'll set the key over here, and I'll set the key over here. Now you should see that it actually looks a lot better, but we really can't move anywhere, right? As I click on these buttons, it doesn't actually do anything. And we technically still only see, we see all the items appearing over here. So we'll get to there. The first thing we want to do is actually allow ourselves to move through different items. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to create a function up here. This function is going to be called getPageURL. It's going to be a function that when you called, it will actually take you to another page and also return the value of the new page URL. So what we need to know is what is the current page. That will be a number. And we need to know where we want to go. So I'm going to change the value in our params. So I'm going to say new URL search params. And I'm going to get the current value of the search params. And then I'm just going to change the value for page to be equal to whatever we're trying to go. And that's going to force us to go to that page. When I return the link to the inventory page, which we can get from the base URL, which remember is just /inventory. And then we put a question mark because this is a search param, and we insert the params.toString. What this will do is when we call this, for example, Let's go to the most obvious one, the going right, because we're in the first page already. So if I click here and I go to the href here and I call the get page URL, where do I want to go if I click the right button, If I click this button over here. Well, think about it. We're trying to go to the next page. So we're trying to go to the current page plus 1. How do we know which page we're in? Well, remember, it's appearing here at the top. If I click next, it's going to take us to page 2. And now we're here. If I click next, it's going to take us to page 3. And now we're there. Exactly how we want. It keeps us taking to the next page. And you see that this keeps expanding, Which is exactly what I wanted. Now, there is a gap in the middle. And there, because of a delta of 2, it only shows 2 out of where you are. Now it kind of makes more sense to you guys. If you guys didn't understand it before, I hope it does. So this is what the get page URL does. You set it to the href, and that makes it such that you're returning that value. You're returning a new URL with the correct params. So we're going to be using that on every single link. We're going to come up here and use this as well here. But in this case, we're going to say current page -1. And then on this one, it's a bit different. We don't want to set it to any specific calculation. We just want to set it to whatever the page number we're trying to go is. So let's test this out. Can I go to 3? Yes, I can. Can I go to 1? Yes, I can. I can't go behind that. Perfect. Can I go to 19? Yes. And I can go forward. Great. Now you might be asking, why is it bringing us up all the time? Well, this page is huge and we keep refreshing the page. So that's the thing. What we want to do now is filter the information over here based on the page we're in. So how do we do that? Well, we have the pagination done. We have the information about that in our URL, and all it takes now is query for our products based on that information. So to make that query, I'm going to come here to where we find all the products, and we're going to first order them by the date in which they were created. That's something that I don't think we were doing. And then I want to skip the products in which the page -1 times the page size, which is 10. Now the page and the page size are below this. So actually when I bring this up here somewhere, maybe here, and the page size as well, I'll just bring it here so we have more space. And what this is doing is it's calculating how many items we're going to skip in querying this based on the current page. For example, if we are in page 3, we actually don't want to query the first 20 items from the list of products ordered by the created at. Why? Because we're in page 3 and the first 20 items were in page 1 and 2. So that's what we're doing. We're getting the current page that we're in, we're subtracting 1, and we're multiplying it times the page size. If we are in page 1, this shouldn't be an issue. Also, we want to limit the amount of products that we're querying per time. We do that by using the take property. Take allows you to give a number. If I were to put 2, you'll see that now it will only give us 2 items. But if I were to put the page size, it's going to give us an actual 10 items, which is what we set. And if I keep going, it will keep moving forward. Actually, let's make the page size be something like 5. I think that will make it look a little bit better. You see there's more pages, but we can keep moving them forward. And the pagination works perfectly. Great. So this is pretty much it for the inventory. Now, we've been using a lot of fake data so far, and that's fine. We added the data through the seed. I think it's time for us to be able to add our own data. So to build that, we're going to come over here and we're going to open up the add product and we're going to create a page.tsx. Now, inside of here, we want to export default async function called add product page. Then inside of here, we're going to return. I'm going to return a div and we're going to first get the user. So we're going to await get current user, just like we normally do. And I need to make this into a const because we're going to be using that throughout our page. Then I want to do the same thing I've done with the other pages. I'm going to set a class name with the minimum height of the screen and a BG gray of 50. Then we insert the sidebar. So I'll insert the sidebar over here and I'm going to set the current path to be equal to add product. We should now be able to see this. If I go to add product, we should see this over here. And you see when we go to add product, it actually shows the correct path. Now below this, we want to start by adding the main tag. And in the main tag, we're setting a class name of ML64 and a padding of 8. Then in here, we're going to set the header. The header will have, actually, I'll just copy the header from the inventory page because it will be pretty much the same thing. So I can just copy this and I'll paste it over here. We saved some time and I can just change the header. I'll say add product. And in here, I'm going to say add a new product to your inventory. This page is actually going to be pretty simple. Then we're going to come down 3 divs and I'm going to add the next section. This section, we're setting a class name of max width to Excel. Then in here, we're setting a div. This div is going to have a class name, BG white. Then rounded large, we're setting a border and a border gray to 100 with a padding of 6. Inside of this div, we're going to add the form to create a new product. Now we're spacing all the items in this form with a space gap in the y direction of 6. Then in this form, we're going to add a div with a label. In this label, we're going to say product name and then put an asterisk. Then in this label, we're going to say the label is a label and we're setting the HTML for it to be to the input with an ID of name. We haven't made it yet, but we're going to make it. We're also going to set a class name. We're going to set the display to block, the text to small, the font to medium, and the text to gray 700. Also a margin bottom of 2. You'll see that it looks a little bit like this. It's just one label appearing on the left. Then below this, we're going to put an input. And this input is going to be of type text. The ID is going to be equal to name. And we're also giving it a name, which is equal to name. We're making it required. And we're going to add a class name. We're setting the width to be the full length, a padding X of 4, a padding Y of 2, the border, and then a border gray 300. Also, we're going to round it. So we're going to say rounded, large, and we're going to focus the border to be transparent like we did before. Also, we're adding a placeholder here. So we're going to say placeholder. We're going to say enter product name. And we should get this over here. Now, the rest of the form items, if you go to this, you'll see it actually have different formats. For example, this one will have a little grid, which shows 2 of them. So I want to come below this div and I want to create a div that is going to be for the grid. So I'm setting it to display grid. Then I'm setting the columns amount to 1. But on a medium screen and above, I'm going to set it to 2, which is what we saw over there. So calls 2. And I'm going to put a gap of 6 in between them. Then inside of this, we're going to copy this entire logic and add it twice because there's 2 inputs inside of it. So we should see something a bit like this. Now, obviously, they should change. It's not going to be a product name. It's going to be the price. And this will be an input of type number. The ID will be price. Same thing with the name. We're also going to put a step. And a step is just how much will it increment, right? So we're going to put it 0, 1 so that it increments like that. Like when we increase the price, it's going to go like this. See? And then we want to make the minimum amount be 0. So we can put a negative price. It's required, and the placeholder is going to be 0.0. Now this is, I made this the bottom one, but it doesn't really matter. The second one is the quantity. So we'll put quantity, and it will be here in HTML for quantity. This will be for price. I forgot to change. And in the text over here, the input, we're going to set the same thing as we did over here. We're going to set it to be an input of type number. The ID is going to be quantity. The name will be quantity. And for the quantity, we do want to put a minimum amount. So we're going to say minimum is equal to 0. And the placeholder is going to be 0 as well. Then it's time for us to write this queue. And for this queue, I'm going to copy the logic of the product name because it's going to be a text as well. We're going to go down 2 divs because remember we had that grid div. And I'm going to add, actually, should we go down 2? Yeah, we should. We're going to add the next group, which is the label for the SKU. But since it's a SKU, it's not required, so it's optional. The HTML here will be SKU, and then I just have to change both of these. And this, I'll just say enter SKU. Then the next one is going to be a number, so I'm going to copy this one. We're going to put down below this. And this one is going to be for the low stock at. So low stock at. And I'll copy this, paste it twice over here. And we're not going to put a step, and the minimum is going to be 0. And yeah, we're going to put a placeholder of enter low stock threshold. Then finally, we're going to add the button to submit. So I'm going to come here, I'm going to add a div, class name of flex and a gap of 4. And we're going to have 2 buttons. The first one is a button to submit. So I'm going to say add product. And we're going to come here. We're going to make this be of type submit. Class name is going to be a padding X of 6, a padding Y of 3, a BG purple 600. The text is going to be white. It's going to be rounded large. And when you hover it, we're going to make the BG be purple 700. Then we're going to add a link. This link is going to be for taking us back. So taking us to the inventory. So I'm just going to make it be a cancel button that will look like a link. So I'm going to add this as a class name over here, but I'm going to change the color. Instead of purple, it's going to be gray, and it's going to be 200. And then this will be gray. I will say like 300. And then the text will be gray 800. And I need to put an href here, so I'm going to put an href to the /inventory page. And then it should look a bit like this. Perfect. Now we can actually submit this, but nothing really happens. If I were to put a number here, and I were to put something, submit, absolutely nothing. Whoa, why is it called price? You see, we got this data as the form data. I forgot to change this over here to say low stock at and make it optional. Perfect. Now what we need to do is we need to pass a action that is going to be part of this action over here. So we're going to create a server action. It's going to be in the same file as the delete server action we have. And it's actually going to be very similar. What we're going to do is we're going to create a create product server action over here. And we are going to get the current user. But what we need to do is we need to first validate for whether or not the form data that we got is valid. How are we going to do this? Well, a great way to do this is by using a library called Zod. So Zod is a great validation library. We're going to install by saying npm install Zod. And it's going to allow us to define the shape of how we want our data to look like. And if the user tries to create a product that doesn't follow that pattern, it is going to spit out a custom error message preventing them from submitting. Now, how do we use Zod here? Well, I'm going to import Z from Zod. And we need to create what is known as the schema. I'm going to call it product schema. We're going to use Z, the object. And in here, we're going to define each field in our form. So we have name, we have price, we have quantity, and we define the structure of each of them. For example, the name is going to be a string. So we say z.string. And I want to make it such that it can't be an empty string. It has to be a minimum amount of characters of 1. And if that is not met, then I'm going to put this custom error saying that the name is required. So this is what we do. We do this for each field, and there's some cool properties that we can apply. So I already did this. This is how I decided to make it. So we made the price be a number, and it can't be negative. If it is negative, somehow it's negative, we have to error this message out. Same thing with quantity. We made it such that it's an integer because price is a decimal, but quantity is a full number. And we also made it not be negative. The skew and the low stock are both optional, so we use the optional field over here. Now, what do we do with this product schema? Well, the first thing we do in our create product is we make sure that what we get back from the form data is parsed correctly. So I'm going to parse our form data using the product schema. We use the safe parse function, and we pass an object with each of our fields. So we're going to pass here the name field, and we can get whatever the user is passing by whenever we pass here the create product action. The names of the fields are going to be present, and we can get it through the form data.get, for example, name. And we can do this for all of the other fields as well. So it will end up looking a bit like this. The skew and the low stock, we're defining them to be undefined if it doesn't get anything, so that it knows, but it's okay because they are optional as well. Now, the important thing is if the parsed value is not a success, meaning there is an error here, you want to do something. I'll just throw a generic error here saying that the validation failed. And then I'm going to try, and I'm going to catch the operation to create a product. So I'm going to throw a new error if there's an issue, but I'm not actually going to include the error because I don't want to give indication of how our backend is set up. I'm just going to say failed to create product. Now in the try here, what I want to do is I want to await prisma.product.create. And then in here, I'm going to pass the data. Now for the data, what I want to do is I'm going to pass an object, and I'm going to insert the parsed.data. That's how I get the data after it's being parsed. Then I want to include the user ID because I only want to create the data with this the current user signed in. So I'm just going to use the user.id to get that information. And thus, we're creating a product with a user ID equal to the ID of the user that is logged in. This should now allow us to create a product. Let's try creating something. Imagine I'm trying to sell a sponge. I'm going to add here a sponge. I'm going to say that I have 900 of it and that the price is $8. Not going to put a skew, not going to put a low stock threshold. I'm going to click add product. I made this required. That's actually a good thing that we tested this because I forgot to remove the required fields from this queue and from the low stock at. But now let's click add product, and if everything is correct, it should have added. Now, nothing interactive happened in our front end, so we're gonna have to change that. But if I go over here and I refresh this, we should now see the sponge appearing over here. Now, to make it such that it redirects us or something, we have to add here a redirect function from next navigation, and I want it to take us to the inventory. And now that we added the redirect, it should actually redirect the user to the inventory page. Great. We're pretty much done with our project. Now, the last thing we need to do is add the ability to come here to the settings page and see something. In this case, we want to just show this little settings page over here. Also, one thing is, if you notice, we have this loading state that appears on all of them. I'm going to show you guys right at the end because it looks a lot better if you do that. Now for the settings page, it's actually very simple. What I'm going to do is I'm going to come here to the settings and I'm going to click new file page.tsx. Then inside of here, I want to export default async function called settings page. Then in here, I'm going to get the user by saying user is equal to await get current user. Then I'm just going to actually copy what we have here for the first part because it's going to be pretty much the same thing. I'm going to return and I'm going to paste this. Then I do need to close this. So I'm going to close the main tag and I'm going to close the div. I need to import the sidebar, and not the sidebar from Lucid React, actually, the sidebar from the components folder. And I need to change this to /settings. Then I'll change this to say, this is the settings page. So settings. And here we should say manage your account settings and preferences. Perfect. Now you might be thinking, this is going to be huge, right? Because we have all this stuff. You can do a bunch of stuff inside of the settings page. You can, choose the email settings. You can sign out. You can change your name, your profile picture, anything you want. You can even enable multi-factor authentication. But actually, this is the easiest page we've worked on so far. All we're going to do is create a div that is going to be the center of the page. So max width 6XL. Then inside of it, we're going to have another div with a class name that is BG white. We're going to set the rounded to be large. We're setting a border and a border gray 200 with a padding of 6. And then inside of this div, we're going to set the account settings. And the account settings component is a component from StackFrame, so the Neon Auth library. And it is going to allow us to show the settings. Now I want to make it be the full page. So I'm actually going to pass here full page. And it's going to give us literally everything we need about our profile. And we should see this over here. Now, this isn't technically the same thing as we see over here. And there's a reason for it. We need to make some minor changes. Now, you might be asking yourself, why does it look completely different from what we have over here? Well, it's actually because this is the same thing, but I accidentally cut this part out because we didn't pass a margin to the main tag over here. So this main tag should actually wrap this too, so that there's a proper margin. And you see that now if I refresh, we do get the whole settings page. So you can see everything and manage everything related to the settings of the user, and it works perfectly. Now, how do we add the final thing, which is a loading state, so that the sidebar doesn't disappear every single time? Well, to do that, I'm actually going to add a loading state that applies to every single route. And that loading state will exist over here. We already have this loading.tsx. This was created by StackFrame because what it does is it already has some loading. If you can see over here, while we're navigating these items, it has its own loading. And that's part of what they already do for us. But for us, we actually want to add some skeletons so that it makes it look like this. So what we want to do is we want to have a component that is the loading state. And that component will always show the sidebar. The only thing that changes is it shows a little bit of some skeletons in the middle of the page. So to do that, I want to do this. I just pasted here my entire loading component for this project. I'm not going to go into detail about it, but I did write some comments. Basically, all we're doing is we are creating a bunch of skeletons. We're always showing the sidebar. And whenever we navigate between the stuff, it now shows that little pulsating skeletons every single time. And the best part is that the sidebar doesn't disappear. Also, I just realized there's a small thing that does change the title of the page. Because you see, I did change a bit the logo from the other app I had. So I do want to change that. If I come here to the sidebar, so you see main content showed sidebar. If it does show the sidebar, then we do want to remove the title. So we created this loading sidebar over here. And in here, we actually want to create get the title portion of the sidebar, right? This part over here, and just paste it on the loading sidebar. I'm pretty sure it's this. And then now it should keep the same. Perfect. And this is basically it. We created an entire inventory management system. It has a beautiful dashboard with a bunch of data, the ability to paginate and read data from a table, and also the ability to add new products and manage your account settings. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like down below and comment what you want to see next. Click the link in the description to check out Neon if you haven't already. I use them for a lot of my videos and a lot of my personal projects. They are a great service and I really appreciate them sponsoring this video. Again, if it really helps the channel, so if you guys could check them out, that would be great. Also, don't forget, if you want to learn NextJS, click the link in the description. You'll find the link to Web Dev Ultra. That's my course platform. And we just launched our new course. So if you want to check it out, we have a discount code that will be in the description as well for the first 100 users. So thank you so much for watching this video, and I see you guys next time.